I now call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting for Thursday, June 14th, 2018 at 6:30. Could we have the clerk do the roll call, please? What?
What is first?
Pardon?
Flag first and then roll
Flag
call.
first, and I have called to order. Oh, yes, you're right, flag. What I'd like to do about the flag salute is I gave everybody a couple things. Today is Flag Day, and I didn't know a lot about it, so I decided to do some research. And if we could take turns, I gave everybody something to read, just for informative for us and anybody else that might be interested. Commissioner Pollard, would you like to start?
Pardon?
Would you like to start?
You start, we're going to read this out loud, is that the idea?
Yeah, it's for everybody.
Okay, item 1. Excuse me just a moment. Betsy Ross is widely credited with designing the first American flag, but there's almost no evidence to support that claim. The only records of Ross's involvement came from her own grandson in 1870 when he presented the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia with affidavits from his own family members as evidence. Instead, many historians believe that Francis Hopkinson deserves the credit because early generals from the Continental, and it stops there on mine.
I don't know, does anybody have the rest of that?
Probably from the Continental Congress mentions him.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay, cool. Okay, and that's item 1.
Item 2, don't you have item 2 too?
Oh, you want me to continue?
Yeah.
Item 2, Karen Burke of Walmart's Corporate Communications revealed that Walmart stores sold around 115,000 American flags on September 11th, 2001, as compared with 6,400 flags on the same date in 2000. In the year following 9/11, September 11th, 2001 through August 19, 2011, they sold 7.8 million American flags as compared to 2.5 million the year before.
That's pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
Joan?
Okay. 17-year-old student designed the flag as it appears today. In anticipation of Alaska and Hawaii becoming states, Robert G. Heft created the 50-star flag as a part of a history project for which he received a B- before submitting it to Congress for consideration. In August of 1959, President Dwight D. Eisenhower chose Heft's design over 1,500 applicants and informed him of the news over the phone. Heft's teacher also changed his grade to an A. Okay, the next one. During the opening sequence, about 22 seconds in the first season of episodes of Gilligan's Island, the U.S. flag can be seen flying at half-staff off in the distance. According to a 1994 audiobook co-authored by Russell Johnson, who played the professor, this is because the show's pilot episode finished filming on November 22nd, 1963, the same day as President Kennedy was assassinated.
You want to make it?
Sure. Number 5, despite the harsh temperatures and conditions of the moon's atmosphere, 5 of the 6 flags that were planted during the Apollo missions are still believed to be standing. According to Buzz Aldrin, the one that fell was blown over by the exhaust from Apollo 11 during its liftoff from the moon's surface. Number 6, according to the U.S. Department of State, the names of the flag's official colors are Old Glory Red, White, and Old Glory Blue. Their HTML codes and Pantone equivalents can be found on the Department of State's Style Guide.
Okay, item number 7, Flag Day isn't technically a federal holiday, and it's not a state holiday outside of Pennsylvania and New York. Furthermore, New York's official observance of Flag Day isn't June 14, when it's commonly celebrated, but rather the second Sunday in June. Another trivial question. Richard Williams, the animation director for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, said that he modeled the title character's colors after Old Glory: red overalls, white fur, blue tie. It looked like an American flag, subliminally speaking, so everybody liked it. And today's June 14th, it's also President Trump's birthday.
Okay. Number 9, there are federal regulations governing the handling and display of the flag, the U.S. Flag Code, including restrictions on using the flag's likeness for advertising or printing it on anything intended for temporary use or discard, like cocktail napkins and paper plates. Under the Flag Protection Act of 1989, there are also federal laws that call for criminal penalties for certain forms of flag desecration.
Desecration.
Yeah, desecration. Although the Supreme Court found this act to be unconstitutional under the First Amendment in 1990. 10. Old Glory, which we've already heard that phrase, was actually a nickname of a specific U.S. flag, namely one owned by a sea captain, William Driver. He was previously given the flag by the woman in his town of Salem, Massachusetts, but he only named it Old Glory. So there's our tidbits on the flag. Shall we rise for the flag salute?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please give us the roll call?
President Norris.
Here.
Vice President Herron.
Here.
Secretary Spikers.
Not present.
Commissioner Pollard.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Did anybody hear from Commissioner Spikers?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So he's not present and probably not excused unless he shows up. Do I have approval for the agenda? Do I have a motion?
I missed that motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion?
Discussion.
Commissioner Pollard?
Yeah, I've long felt that there's something wrong with having an action item at the end of a committee report, because approval of warrants and so forth is new business. And I think it should be listed under new business and not part of the committee report.
Now, my thought would be if the warrants are due at the month and we don't approve the warrants, then that puts our payments and our approval 60 days out.
I think it's not an issue of whether the warrants will be approved. They'll be approved, but they need to be in the proper place on the agenda, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, I see. So where would you rather see them?
Well, as new business.
As new business?
It is new business.
I see what you're saying. Is there any other comments about that?
Maybe Skip has a comment on that. Of course, you know, the chair can pretty much do what she wants, but I think that's the proper way. I don't know of any other organization that makes an action item like that part of a committee report.
I need a pen.
Well, Madam President and Commissioner
Yes.
Pollard, it really is the preference of your board and body, and it varies from commission to others. Sometimes they are listed as new items or new action to be taken.
New business.
New business. Other times it's by topic. So as you would go down, you would have an action item under committee report or a resolution to be adopted after you discuss that item. So it's really your preference. There's no specificity identified in Robert's Rules of Order. We are going to talk about tonight under Robert's Rules of Order the adoption of an agenda. So
Yes.
it's
Okay.
timely that we're going to talk about that. But what you've heard today is a comment from Commissioner Pollard. Unless it's a motion that's seconded, you know, you have to adopt your agenda, and you have a prearranged agenda that's sent out. You could move that you reorder the agenda if there's a second and it's passed by a majority, then you reorder your agenda. If you don't, you just follow it.
I'm not proposing to reorder the agenda. I'm proposing that the action item currently attached to the committee report be moved under new business because it is new business. But once something is on the agenda, it's very difficult to change, as you're implying. So you've got it typed out, and if this is the way the board wants to do it, fine. But I just think it's improper. And I've never seen it before for any other organization where the committee report is a action item mixed up.
Maybe I can suggest that our plate's pretty full, but maybe the ad hoc bylaws committee now look at that in terms of the order of business.
Yeah, but would you think that approval of warrants would go under like a treasurer's report?
Again, it's the preference of your body, of your organization, how you want to run your meeting. And as you know, we're working on rules of procedures for your meeting. So it's how you want to operate your meeting, how you want to draft your agenda. How you want to run your meeting.
For me, it makes sense because each committee has a certain responsibility, and they bring that responsibility or that request to the board. And when we approve their, like the warrants really belong in Finance Committee. I know there's things in facilities that belong there, and the Bylaws Committee, when they bring the bylaws, it will come to us via that committee, and we will vote after that committee brings it to us, and we have discussion, and then we'll vote on it. So it makes sense to me. Now, it may not to others.
Makes sense to leave it the way it is.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
The thing is that decisions cannot be made in committee. And by doing it this way, it also indicates a decision. And yes, facilities or medical can also make recommendations, but if there is going to be a change or action item, it would be under new business. So at any rate, so that we don't waste time, we've got a long agenda.
Yeah.
Just go ahead this time, but please reconsider that, perhaps in the bylaws.
Okay. All righty, so,
So was there a motion?
no, there wasn't a motion, it was a
There was
comment.
no motion.
It's comments.
Okay.
That was a
Thank you.
comment.
Let's just move along.
I made a motion to approve the agenda.
Yeah. I second. And then discussion.
Approve the minutes?
No, the
The agenda.
Agenda, that you approved the agenda. And is there a second? Emma made a second. Let the record show that Commissioner Spikers is here, please. Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of the agenda as it is written here, say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Abstain.
One abstention. Thank you. Okay. So now we are going to move to an executive session to discuss a legal counsel potential and actual litigation involving the district as authorized in RCW 42.3. It will be a 10-minute executive session. So we're going to have to ask people to leave for 10 minutes and come back and see us. It's 6:53 and we are reconvening our Snoqualmie Valley Hospital District's Board of Commissioners meeting. Communications, I think I already did mine.
Public comment.
Public
Public comment.
Oh, public comment, that's right. Okay, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Scott Scowcroft, West Seattle. Just a real brief public comment, and this is one that I had prepared before the meeting, and that is just reviewing the meeting from last time. I hope that for this meeting and going into the future, that you'll be able to avoid being drawn into trivial or unnecessary discussions about parliamentarian procedures or other things that at the end of the day really don't matter that much. There was a report that Tom could have presented about the accomplishments of the district last month. I was looking forward to videotaping that and being able to present it to the public, but you ran out of time, and you ran out of time, in my opinion, because you had a discussion about something that at the end of the day really doesn't matter. And I'm thinking back in the last 6 years of the meetings that I've come to, and I remember many such discussions. They just tend to suck the air out of the oxygen out of the room, in my opinion, and they keep you from really attending to some of the important things. So I really encourage you to keep up on the path that you've been on recently, focus in on the things that are important, and do good things for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Hearing and seeing none, then we will move on to communications. And I think first on communications is myself, and we just did a thing which David missed on the flag, and that was something I wanted to share, so that was my communication. So I'm going to yield now to our Superintendent CEO, Tom Parker.
Thank you. You have in your packets my monthly report, and I'll go through that as I usually do. Starting with our affiliation strategy, we've now provided each of the potential affiliate partners with copies of our 2017 audited financial statements. Reminder of who those are: that's Overlake Medical Center, Virginia Mason, and University of Washington Medicine, UW-Medicine. In addition to those documents, we've provided them with our 2018 April year-to-date financials, the 2017 Medicare cost report, the 2017 market study, the 2016 community health needs assessment, the 2015 financial feasibility study that was produced by Ide Bailey, and the official statement of our 2015 revenue bonds. Steve Daniel and I will meet with each organization over the next few weeks to review our financial information and discuss the major deal points that I presented at our May work study meeting. I'm looking forward to reporting on the results of those meetings.
Would you prefer to take questions at the individual items or at the end?
Let's go item by item.
Okay, I thought that we said at one of the recent meetings that by the end of June, you would actually know who's interested and who isn't interested. And you would bring that to us, but it looks like we're talking about weeks now.
Absolutely. There's an old saying that no plans survive contact with the enemy. Now, this is not our enemy, but it's that.
Are you sure?
No, I'm sure. But plans are plans, and reality is reality. And when you start to try to schedule multiple people for these meetings, it's a challenge. The other thing that extended our timeline a couple of weeks was the fact that each one of the organizations wanted to have copies of the 2017 financial statements and the cost report before they entered into the next conversation with us, and they wanted time to be able to consume that information. They wanted time to be able to consume that information before meeting with us, and that's why the timeline extended some, because, as you know, tonight on our agenda, we're reviewing the 2017 audit financial statements.
I have another question on this section, unless one of the other board members would like to ask a question.
Is there somebody else that has a question? Commissioner Pollard, the chair recognizes you.
It has to do with the 2016 community needs assessment. You know that's under law, that's supposed to be done every 2 years.
3 years.
Pardon?
It's 3.
Is it 3 years?
It's 3, yes.
At any rate, the 2016 community needs survey was, in my opinion, not good because we piggybacked onto the Bellevue overlay needs assessment, and it lost its focus on the true needs of this community. So I think, in a sense, we haven't had a community needs assessment that really addresses the needs of the community, the hospital district, since 2014. That's my opinion, and would you want to comment?
No comment on that, except for the fact that that was done in order to help us with our strategic planning, and the timeline was tight. Community health needs, a good community health needs assessment takes up to 9 months to complete. I have had conversations with 2 organizations who do that work for us, or could do that work for us. I am expecting to have the second bid in next week so that we can get that process started and do a full scope community health needs assessment.
That's great. I noticed that Astria had an excellent community health needs survey assessment, and if you want to look at a good one, Astria of all people has a good one.
Thank you. I'll continue then with the report. Finances. The financial report will show that April there was a net income of $78,000 compared to the budgeted net income of $15,000. Unrestricted cash rose to $9 million. Year to date, net income is $426,000 compared to our budget loss of $89,000. It's a favorable variance of $515,000. Average daily census in April almost broke a record, but it was at 24.4 compared to the budget of 22. That's an occupancy rate of 98%. The ED visits in April were down, though, down 12% under budget at 286. Operating expenses in April were 1% over budget, and we are 1% under budget year to date through the end of April. Just a preview on May, our inpatient census was lower in May at 21.4. The ED, I haven't seen this happen before, we had 335 visits and our budget was 335. The 2016, and this is wrong, excuse me, that was my typo, 2017 audited financial statements will be presented at this evening's meeting by Moss Adams. The audit will show a favorable change from 2016 to 2017 in operating income and the change in net position. And that in 2017 we met all of our bond covenants. Despite having a Medicare payback this year, our current projections are that we will continue to meet all of our bond covenants. Take a look at emergency services. In response to the periodic reapplication for our stroke and cardiac categorization, the State Department of Health has again approved the hospital's stroke level 3 and cardiac level 2 categorization. As a reminder, the emergency cardiac and stroke system was created in 2010 with the intention to save lives and reduce disability for heart attack, cardiac arrest, and stroke patients. Emergency medical services take patients directly to hospitals that meet care requirements and choose to participate in this system.
Question?
Yes.
The question is, could you explain these categorizations? That is cardiac, let's see, is stroke level 3 and cardiac level 2. Is that the lowest? Or where is that in the spectrum?
That is, stroke has 3 levels, and 3 is the entry level, and cardiac has 2, and 2 is the entry level. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can go onto the Department of Health website and see the categorization provided, or categorization that has been granted to each of the hospitals that are participating in the program. And there are hospitals in this area that are not categorized, and we are. So we're very proud of that. Moving on to the 340B drug program. The program has now been underway since mid-April with the following participating pharmacies: Bartell Drug in Snoqualmie and North Bend, and Safeway in North Bend. Kroger's is currently not accepting new applicants for the program, and we plan to apply during the next quarter's open window. That's in October. Bringing Kroger's on will add QFC in North Bend and the Fred Meyer in Issaquah.
Do you want to explain what the 340B drug program is?
Certainly. Critical access hospitals are allowed to apply for and receive approval from Medicare that requires drug companies to provide drugs to those hospitals at a significant discount. Mm-hmm. We are also allowed to pass along that discount to area pharmacies and be able to receive the difference back between what a regular price for that drug is and what we're able to buy it for through the 340B program, and that provides some revenue back to the hospital. So we get our drugs for cheaper, and we're able to actually work out a deal with the pharmacies so that we can leverage even more of that
related
pricing.
Question, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Pollard.
Yeah. How does that impact the consumer as far as the price advantage goes?
It's transparent to the consumer, meaning it's a no effect on the consumer.
So the consumer does not benefit from the reduced price.
The consumer is typically, in this case, is the insurance company. So the insurance company is still paying the retail drug price. We're able to work out a deal with the pharmacies and the federal government to be able to get that cost savings back to the hospital.
Okay, thank you.
Our rural health clinic, we anticipate approval once we receive the unannounced site survey. I know that's a duplication of last month, but that is what it is until we get surveyed. Note on our volunteer program. We've just relaunched our volunteer program. It is now coordinated by Jim Scussel, who is our Director of Rehabilitation. Members of the community who would like to volunteer at the hospital should contact Jim, and I've provided the phone number here and his email address. And lastly, Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank Community Resource and Fun Fair. We are participating with the Snoqualmie Food Bank in their fair by having social work and nursing staff present and providing information about the district services that we provide and doing blood pressure checks. This is on Wednesday, June 20th, noon to 2 at the Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank. And that concludes my report.
There's a North Bend food bank, isn't there, and Snoqualmie? Is it just one food bank?
There actually, yeah, correct. There's a food bank in Falls City. There's a food bank in North Bend. There are 2 food banks in Snoqualmie. And I believe there's also a food bank in Carnation.
Yes. Plus there's a food bank in Preston.
And that's right. I'm sorry.
There is
yes.
one.
Okay, well, when we say at the food bank, which one are we talking about?
Well, because the title of this item is Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank Community Resource Fair, I abbreviated just because I'd already put the title of the food
There's
bank
only one
in the report.
Snoqualmie Valley.
Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank, as opposed to the other one in Snoqualmie, which is the Mount Si Food Bank.
That one's in North Bend, isn't it?
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the volunteer program, CEO
Yes.
Parker, what other method do members of the community find out besides just the number that is presented? Is there, do we send out information to the community bulletin?
As I was putting this agenda item together, I actually asked myself that very question, and I will be doing tomorrow a blast over the Yahoo groups and putting it on our Facebook page.
Are there any other questions for CEO Parker? Hearing none, then we will move on. And now we get our legal counsel to give us a little bit of help.
Thank you, Madam President, and board members again. This is your 5 minutes of Robert's Rule reminders. And the topic this evening is going to be addressing the order of business, the orders of the day, and the agenda or program. And what that means to everyone except for Robert's Rules is an agenda. And as you'll note, organization meetings in which adoption of an agenda is large organizations. Sometimes it's hard to extremely follow all their requirements, but they do have a procedure for adoption, in which case it's usually done at the outset of a session and intended to cover the entire session. But if you move down to the 3rd and 4th paragraph, this is the customary approach for you. In some organizations, it is customary to send out each member in advance of a meeting an order of business or agenda, with some indication of the matters to be considered. Such an agenda is often provided for information only, with no intention or practice of submitting for adoption. In your case, you in fact are submitting it for adoption. It's a pre-circulated agenda, and it's usually formally adopted at your session. It is not binding as to detail or order, other than it lists from the pre-existing orders of the day. So when you get down to the changing of an agenda, you have a proposed agenda that you come to your meetings with. So when the adoption of a proposed agenda is pending, it's subject to amendment by majority. So these are the 3 takeaways. One is it's before the body. It's subject to amendment, as you did tonight. You reviewed it, you chose not to amend it, but you had discussion about it. After the agenda has been adopted by the assembly, no change can be made except by a 2/3 vote. So if you adopted your agenda tonight and then someone made a motion that they wanted to reorder it or add something, it could be amended by a 2/3 vote, a vote of majority of the entire membership, or unanimous consent. And then finally, the 3rd takeaway there is an affirmative vote to adopt an agenda may not be reconsidered. So once it's been adopted, you can't have a motion to reconsider. But you could, with a 2/3 vote a vote of majority of the entire membership or unanimous consent, you could modify your agenda after it was adopted.
Question?
Yes?
Robert's rules, and for that matter, state law in many cases, bows to the bylaws of other organizations. And so if something different is written in the bylaws, that supersedes or supplements Robert's Rules of Order, as I understand it.
That is correct. If your bylaws have specific or specificity that goes beyond what Robert's Rule says, then you would follow your bylaws.
Okay, we might want to consider that in the bylaw revision to see if there's anything we want to write up.
You can see your committee members are nodding their heads. They're
have been
considering.
doing that.
They've been considering for 5 months now.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Counsel. Okay, we now have a consent agenda to approval of minutes for the May 10th, 2018 regular meeting, May 23rd, 2018 work study, and physician credentialing.
Madam President, there was not an executive medical meeting this month, so there will be no physicians to credential.
Thank
I
you.
couldn't hear that. Is this amplified? Even next door, I can't hear you properly.
I just said there will not be a vote on physician credentialing because there was not an executive medical meeting
For this month.
to
For month of
provide
May.
any list of people to be credentialed.
Oh, yeah, I guess that agenda should have been changed to remove that then. Yeah. I was puzzled why we didn't have something to support that.
No, maybe.
Well, at this point, I think it's already taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I'd like to remove these from consent agenda because I have a very minor change to one of the minutes.
so you want to, so you don't want them to be either in the minutes, either the 10th or the 23rd?
Well, since we're going to remove one of them in order to provide for a comment, I just suggest and that's the only item. The other item we can deal with separately or as a consent agenda, but it's only one item. See the point?
I'm not sure that I do.
If he pulls one out, then you've got to deal with them both separately anyway.
Yeah, okay, okay. So do you want to change it or we want to leave it as it is?
Perhaps we could approve the minutes of May 10th.
May 10th? Okay.
I move with approval of the minutes of May 10th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the May 10th, 2018 regular meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any disapproval? Okay, then that passes. And then we want to put the work study on a separate,
Well, a separate vote because
Yes.
I just have a very minor correction, and that is that it does not say minutes on there, on the title page. We should follow our pattern of indicating the word in minutes. So that's clear, it's not an agenda, it's the minutes.
okay, so it seems to me if it doesn't say it and it's not clear, then maybe we should just leave that for the next meeting.
Oh,
It
no,
should come
this
back?
needs to be changed. It's
Can we
very
change it?
simple. It's a simple change.
Add the word?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could approve the minutes as amended.
Is there approval, a second to approve it? Is there a motion to change the title of the minutes, adding the word minutes to the May 23rd? Is that what it was?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none, do we approve the May 23rd, 2018 work study minutes with the change of the comment that it says minutes on it? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay, so that's been approved with an amendment. And there's no medical credentialing, so we'll leave that blank. Committee reports. First is the Finance Committee. Commissioner Spikers, would you like to share that with us?
Sure. We had, Eric came in and spoke with us about the audit, and I've been with him a few times, and he'll probably speak a little bit more, but I just want to give a little bit of the the flavor of the time that we had at the finance meeting, and many years he's not been so happy, I'll just say. So I thought he's pretty conservative, and when he said that things look a lot better than they were in the past, and he'll talk a little bit more today. But that was they took up quite a bit, because I think I asked a lot of questions of him, and he'll speak about some of the issues and the things that we both conversed on when he. So short and sweet on that. We were, aside from the 500,000 ahead in our projection, there were some things I looked at. I always look for any kinds of red flags and ask why things were up or low or sideways or whatever. And some of the things we got some other types of. We have some, apparently, surface water management taxes again ended up 8,000 above what we projected. Lease and rentals, we had a month where we had to pay the yearly fees, so that was above average or above projections. Purchase services, same thing, it's a yearly fee. One of the things that I kind of got stuck on with Steve is to look at, because we haven't been that bad on accounts receivable. It's not been like bad or anything like that, but I keep looking at the averages, and I wanted to, and so I asked, well, what's our clinic average turnaround in payment? Well, it was 27 days. Well, what's our Medicare payment, which is our inpatient is about half of our revenue. Well, that's about 45 days on the average. Well, why are we at 55? So I've asked him to look into that. So there's got to be something, like maybe outpatient services or specialty care, or specialty services. So he's going to look at that and see what's going on. And we've exceeded all requirements for a bond. I mean, we're 1.95 debt services coverage versus 1.2. It's the last page of the report. If you look at that, page 3, we're well above what we're supposed to be at a minimum. And we have to have 60 days cash on hand. We have 113 days cash on hand, which is nearly 3.5 months. So those are all good things. Most everything looked positive. The one thing I did look at, and I thought it was a little interesting, because about every 3 months I take my own audit of what is the percentage of Medicaid, Medicare, and self-pay. And at one point we were, years ago, about 55%, and then it went up to 60%, and then the last time I looked, maybe 6 months ago, was at 65 or 70%, somewhere in there. We're now a combined average of about 77% in the hospital, and
is that Medicare, Medicaid?
Medicare, Medicaid, and self-pay. So what that signifies is that the 99% isn't doing too bad for us. And I think what we're getting on the Medicaid, we're getting a sweet spot on the outpatient service Medicaid reimbursement, which does pay. And that means our outpatient services are climbing a little bit. And even though we're getting Medicaid reimbursement, it's paying fairly well. Am I wrong on that, Tom?
Medicaid in the outpatient side is good.
Yeah, so the fact that we're up at 73 to 77% of our reimbursement from those three areas doesn't mean a really bad thing. I always thought it was a bad thing when we were getting reimbursed by Medicaid, only on the inpatient side. So, and since about a year ago, we had some tremendous social worker advances and unbelievable work that they did, and got us from 6 Medicaid patients, I think, at one point. We're averaging just over 1 per month. And that really does help out a lot. If you look at any of the other hospitals, because we only have 25 beds, I'm sure they're not at 1/25th even. So we're providing a service to people in need still, and probably at a higher percentage of public benefit to these folks that are coming in on an inpatient basis. So anyway, that's, and the one last comment on, because this is going to be coming up, we've been talking about it in emails and everything, but I've asked staff to look at, when we're considering any kind of a compensation package for Mr. Parker, Tom Parker, is to not look at, I would like to see a lot of areas of the country looked at, but only in a percentage basis, not like, I want to compare, let's say if we're down in Alabama and the average CEO is getting paid $120,000 down there, and they get a $5,000 or $3,000 salary increase. That's really not a good thing to compare 3,000 and equate it to the Northwest. So it's got to be on a percentage basis. So whatever the percentage in, the compensation package is, the percentage increases for a certain merit, that's what we should be looking at. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country. We can then look at other areas, no matter where they are, and try to get hospitals that are very comparable to ours. So anyway, that was the tidbit I threw in. And is there any questions at all? I think we've had a lot of there's a lot of information written here, so but there could be questions by any of you.
Anybody have any questions for Commissioner Spikers?
Just something about the outpatient and inpatient. So the outpatient is okay with the Medicaid reimbursement?
Yes.
What about our
It's not more than okay.
What about our inpatient Medicare
Inpatient is
pay?
about $200 a day versus our $2,850 reimbursement by Medicare.
I know Medicare, before we can get it, they have to meet the 2-day stay. Is that something?
It's 3.
It's a 3-day stay now? I thought it was 2-day stay.
3 in the acute, and then they qualify, Medicare patients qualify for their skilled benefit. Many commercial insurers follow that rule.
It's 3 days, I see, okay.
So we used to be at almost $4,000 reimbursement when we first opened the hospital here, and per patient day, and that's how more efficient that we've been able to come. And that's what I said, there's the only way we're going to be able to do anything is to become more efficient. And by becoming more efficient, we save the federal government actually millions every year now, based on our efficiency. And we're still, it's not like we're not doing okay. We're doing whatever, we're doing better than we were when we were getting reimbursed at $4,000 a day almost. We've become that efficient. It's just, it's been a collective effort, I think, by the staff, the entire staff, because without them being able to try to look at our Truvan standards and try to get to those standards, we would not be able to be in a position that we are in right now.
Commissioner Spikers does an awesome job, and I know some of you have been at Finance Committee and seen what he does, and I really appreciate it. And my concerns when I came on this board were financial concerns, and they have changed during the last 4 years. Wouldn't you say, Commissioner Pollard? When you and I ran before, our finances were in terrible condition, and they've gotten considerably better. And I appreciate that. I think we may not be perfect, but we're doing a lot better than we were. And it's the staff that has helped that to happen. Commissioner Pollard.
Just a clarification, imaging is down under budget, it says. Mm-hmm. And now when you say imaging, is that endoscopy?
No.
What other imaging are we talking?
CT scan, MRI.
All of them.
And,
Things that would be radiology related.
Yeah, and I believe that we have some folks that were not working for a little while. Weren't they on leave?
Right, and
so
we had some downtime with MRI, but we've completed some departmental changes that we wanted to make there. We've also expanded the hours of service for MRI and CT, providing especially our emergency room providers with more options later into the night without having to wait for on-call staff to come in.
And one of the things I think that has made a difference recently is in the rehab. About 3 months ago or 4 months ago, I was really, for about 6 months straight, I was wondering what was going on with rehab. And I got a lot of different answers. Nobody really knew. One was the traffic's too busy here, that white people don't want to come here. We're charging too much, and at one point one of the insurance companies was not going to pay for it.
Our patients.
And then finally, we finally got that straightened out, but it still really wasn't doing what we thought it should be doing. And so now we've expanded hours, and I think that's helped. So
it has helped. We're still challenged with the difference in charges between a hospital-based outpatient rehab program and non-hospital-based other rehab providers in the market. And so we're working on some analysis. We've been doing that for a little over a month now of what it would look like if we had some of our outpatient services elsewhere in the community. The other thing is, and it's back to what you mentioned, Commissioner Spikers, about Medicaid. As a good payer in the outpatient business, it's absolutely a great payer for us in outpatient rehab. And so we're going to focus our messaging in the community to help people who are on Apple Health plans to know that they can come here. There's no out-of-pocket costs. We're the one provider of outpatient rehab services in the area who really want to have Medicaid enrollees come for outpatient rehab services. There are not really a lot of other providers who do well with Medicaid except for us. So our messaging will focus on that as well.
Question on that point. Do we get full cost reimbursement on outpatient for Medicaid?
It's not a cost-based reimbursement, but it is a very favorable reimbursement methodology.
I have a couple more questions. Let others ask first.
Does anybody else have a question? The chair recognizes Commissioner Pollard.
Okay. I guess I just want to say I'm very encouraged that we're going to be attracting Medicaid clients, patients, because, if a Medicaid patient who's financially strapped can't come to a public hospital, where are they to go? And so I feel bad when I hear that for whatever reason we have a quota on the inpatient, and we limit that substantially because we lose about $2,800 per day for Medicaid patients as opposed to Medicare patients. But I think that it's a moral issue. But at any rate, I think it's important that we can, I think you publicize, attract, make efforts to get Medicare or Medicaid patients, even on an outpatient basis, because we're going to have an affordable housing development right near here. And it's likely that some of those people, or many of those people, might be Medicaid eligible. So I'm encouraged by the news that we're looking positively toward Medicaid patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollard.
I had a question.
I think,
I would just like to make a quick comment about Commissioner Pollard's comment about Medicaid inpatient, and just to clarify that we do have a budget for inpatient swing. Inpatient acute, there is no what I call management of the payer mix on that. If they're needing to be admitted, we admit them regardless of payer status. Thank you.
And
Commissioner Spikers?
yeah, I think Commissioner Norris, President Norris asked you a question and you never responded. I think she asked you twice about what you thought about our finances in the past 4 years, and I still haven't heard a response.
I think they're improving.
No, I'm talking to Commissioner Pollard. Sorry.
I think it's too complex a question to answer in a sentence, so that's why I didn't answer. I think in some areas, good. In some areas, we still are very much under pressure. So we're continuing from month to month, and that's good. The doors are open, and we are here to do business. So when I hear something like accepting more Medicaid patients, that's very gratifying.
If there's an area that you think, I think it would be helpful for the board to know what those areas are, so that as a board, as a whole, we can all look at that and be concerned about it as a unit. So if there's certain areas, it would be helpful for us if you'd let us know what those are.
Okay, I'll develop something in writing and send it to you.
To all of us?
Then if you want to distribute it, send to you.
Okay. Does that satisfy Commissioner Spikers?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I always encouraged, and I'm sorry I cut you off, Joan, and you may respond now if you want, but I encourage the rest of the members to sit in on the Finance Committee from time to time if they wish to.
Yes.
Because it really does help understand a very, very important component of where we are right now. So.
And I think that's our biggest role as a board, is knowing and understanding the finances. That's the tax dollars and what happens, and that's our biggest responsibility. So I think that the more we all can be involved, and that's why even when we come up to the next couple of items ahead, why we all are going to review the CEO together. It is not an individual's decision. It is the board as a whole. We are all responsible. And the more we can act as a board together, it's more effective and it's better for the community. Let's move on. Is there anything else from Finance Committee?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, one other thing, I moved to approve the
Warrants?
warrants at this time, and I have them in front of me. Move to approve a grand total of $2,550,718.55. That is actually fairly low. If you've been following, we've had warrants as high up as 35 or 3.5 million. So what does that to me indicate is, one, it's not a 3 payroll month, and number two, our expenses are down. So.
I will second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, we have 4 ayes and 1 no. Before we move.
According to, maybe it's too late, but I'd like to have roll call vote on that. I'll make the
Okay.
note that,
If you want to do that, we can do that. A roll call vote for the passing of the warrants.
Okay.
yeah.
President Norris,
Yes.
Vice President Herron,
Aye.
Secretary Spikers,
Aye.
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollard.
No.
Thank you. Before we leave Finance Committee, we are going to have a finance report from Moss Adams, which happens every year about this time. Thank you, Eric.
Today, sorry.
Too busy. You have the floor.
Let's wait for the presentation to come up.
So thank you all for having us. We have issued our financial statements for December 31st, 2017, effective May 24th. With me today, I'm Nicholson. I'm the partner in charge of your audit. With me is Matt Stopa. Matt has been on the audit for several years. And a year ago, he was promoted to senior manager, which means he can write the name Moss Adams now, like a partner can. So I brought him along here to help me with the presentation. Matt's going to go through some of the results of the audit and the balance sheet, and then I'll kind of come through and look at the income statement and some of the trends we're seeing in the marketplace. And questions along the way are very welcome. I'll always love the feedback. And away we go.
Thank you, Eric. So we'll go ahead and get started with the required board communications. As part of the standard audit process, we're required to meet with the board or designee twice throughout the process. We have pre-engagement communications and then communications once the audit has been issued. And this fulfills our requirement under the second meeting. So to start off, the audit was issued, as Eric mentioned, on May 24th, and the organization received an unmodified opinion, and that is considered a clean opinion on the financial statements. And that says that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP as we like to call it. And then as part of that, there was so we say it's a clean audit, and then as part of that, we also like to extend our gratitude to management and the staff who have been helpful throughout that process. We also issue a 3-page letter. It's boilerplate in nature, covering the important board communications. And within that report, like I mentioned, very boilerplate. There were no issues discussed prior to our retention as an auditor, no disagreements with management, nothing that we would consider a corrected or uncorrected adjustment. And from an internal control perspective, no deficiencies noted as part of our audit procedures. Now getting into the financial statement trends. So I'll cover the next couple slides on what we would call the statement of net assets. Also, a lot of people know it as a balance sheet side of the financial statement. So first we're starting with the big picture, looking at your total assets and deferred outflows of resources and total liabilities. And the way the graph works is you start with 2013 and move your way the next 4 years through 2017 on your right. You can see the difference between your assets and your liabilities year over year, and the 3 prior years being relatively consistent in nature. So just focusing in on what would be the asset side, and it's broken into assets and deferred outflow composition. You're going to see very consistent numbers over the last 3 years. A couple items to point out. So you start with your cash and investments. That is slightly up this year, a couple $1 million. Patient receivables up about $1 million. Capital assets, so that's your fixed assets or the building, for example, that has decreased the last 3 years, and that's just the depreciation that's recorded on that building. Over time, the building gets older and it becomes less valuable from an accounting perspective. And that's the cause for the decrease there. And then you add some other assets, which have been relatively consistent with the prior 5 years. From a liabilities and net position, so this is the other side of the statement of net assets. You can see accounts payables, your payables in general have been consistent with the prior years. Your debt, it looks consistent, but it's actually decreased about $1.2 million or $1.3 million, and that's the payments that you continue to make on the bonds that were issued 2 years ago. And then net position, very consistent with the prior year, which is a good sign. That means there's it was basically a break-even year in 2017. And once we get to the income statement side of things, Eric will kind of get into detail what those operation results look like for 2017. So we have a couple ratios that we like to look at from a balance sheet perspective. So the first one we have here is your days cash and investments. And what this number says, it's a rough calculation, and it says if the hospital stopped bringing in cash today, how many days could you continue to run your business as is? Well, the answer as of December 31st, 2017 was 194 days. And to take a step back and just see the information on the graph. So on the left, you have the 5 years of history for the hospital, and then on the right, you have the critical access data. So we were able to grab some publicly available data, and you can see that the Washington critical access hospitals on average were 89 days cash for 2016, and then the United States average was 77 days. So you can see that the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital was quite a bit higher on their days cash compared to other critical access hospitals for 2016. Days net revenue and accounts receivable. So this rough calculation is saying how many days of revenue makes up your accounts receivable as of year end. And the same layout of the slide as previously, you can see the comparison to critical access hospitals and then the prior years. There was a slight uptick in the receivables this year, and that was mostly due to the increase, the days accounts receivable was mostly due to the increase in receivables itself. There was a slight increase in revenue, which would, all things equal, would have brought down the days, but the accounts receivable itself caused the days to go up. And just a nuance too, comparing yourselves to the Washington and U.S. critical access hospitals. As mentioned from the Finance Committee report, there is a large government payer mix, so Medicare, Medicaid, and a lot of those are billed on a monthly basis. So that's going to cause you to be a little bit higher based on your payer mix compared to some of the other comparable organizations, as you can see on that slide.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion, as Commissioner Spiker said earlier. And my gut take was just, I think, some of that, from 66 to 44 days compared to others in the state, definitely some of that is because it takes 30 days before you can drop bills on a significant portion of that's some of it. Another piece of it is this year, Medicare was paying you a lot compared to your cost. And so because of that, your AR is high, but then we have a big $2 million payable back to them under settlement. So some of that is a little ballooned because of that, the way Medicare was paying you throughout the year. And then I also think there's some where there's probably some opportunity to bring in some cash. So I think it's probably a mix of those three things. It's kind of my gut. I think, having your finance team take a look at that and trying to break that down for you, I think it's a good idea. So it's not terrible. I mean, if we were back at 106 like in 2014, obviously a lot of work to be done there. But I think there's something to look at.
I think Medicare, Medicaid can be very frustrating from a financial, knowing what's going to get paid and what's not.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the cause, I'll tell you, I think a lot of it is more the mix of outpatient versus inpatient versus Medicare. Most of the cause, they're looking at 60-70% Medicaid, Medicare as well. So it's pretty consistent on the hospital side. So
actually, Medicare and Medicaid are much more reliable funders than private insurance. Is that true? And private insurance,
sometimes, yeah.
Is private insurance slower to pay?
Depends on the payer. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It depends.
Depends on when you.
Everyone has, in some of the Medicare, especially some of the managed care on the Medicare side, some of those payers are very slow and very much a pain to deal with, and they'll fight everything as they go. So it really depends on your community and your mix and and the provider. So
All that said, I'll just say that I know our CFO has been tirelessly working on the AR issue since the Finance Committee meeting and doing a lot of research on that.
You recall when Medicare just broke down. We were paid for 3 months.
It went down.
I mean, so being reliable, not necessarily.
When they have problems, they're big.
And when there is a small glitch, it means a big thing to a smaller hospital like this.
It does.
especially when it's 70% plus your business, right?
Right, but what I was thinking of is that we get full cost reimbursement on Medicare. And private insurance does not pay as well.
Correct.
As full cost reimbursement.
Yeah, depends on the contracts and the patients and inpatient, outpatient. But that's more of a how you do bottom line on the operations versus how long it's taking to collect that cash. Sometimes they can pay you well, so you're making a little bit of money off of it, but they're taking a while to get you the cash. That's all. That's all the timing is. Makes sense? Great. So I'm going to take over now and kind of go through the operating side of the business. So as you can see on the slides here, this is the first year since we've been auditing this district. I'm going slow because I like to say these words, that operating revenue is bigger than operating expenses. So very nice year. We're up 34.2 in revenues versus 31.9 of expenses. So $2.3 million improvement over the prior year. And it's a lot of hard work and effort that has gone into this. These things don't happen easily. And so, great.
Did you say 2013 was the first year Moss Adams?
No, we've been doing it for several years beyond that. But I'm saying that this is the first year that we've been doing it that you've actually made money from operations.
You recall how long we've associated with you?
Since I've been here.
Yeah.
At least 10 years, huh?
At least 10 years.
Probably 10, probably 12.
Yeah, 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yes. Just great here. So this takes expenses as a percentage of your operating revenue, and your people costs. You were running around 80% just 3 years ago. You're now at 58.5. So just opening up the hospital, and then really a lot of focus here. Professional fees were held consistent. Supplies were a little bit up, but still better than 3 of the last 4 years. Purchase services have been controlled at 5.1%. Depreciation is a non-cash item. It's just something that we do. That we actually get some reimbursement out of it from Medicare, Medicaid, and other costs were also controlled well. And so overall, you can see that operating expenses were 100.1% last year, and they're now 93.3%. So operating margin of 6.7%, which is really good. And then a change in net position is a minus 0.8%. And kind of the reason that loss is really because what goes in a district non-operating is the interest on the bonds. And while most districts, all that interest is paid by taxes, yours is not. Your LTGOs are, but your revenue bonds are not paid by taxes. And so because of that, your non-operating section is usually a bit of a loss as opposed to other comparables. And that'll kind of show up as we have some comparisons going forward.
Would you mind repeating that? I couldn't get that with clarity.
Okay, so in most districts, all of their debt is really supported by taxes.
Right.
So the principal and interest payments are covered with taxes, right? So what happens is the taxes, because all you have in the income statement is the interest. So typically the taxes are more than the interest being paid. So you get below operations and then income goes up in most districts. With you, you have revenue bonds that you did not pass additional taxes for. The community is not paying for those. That's coming out of the operations of the hospital. So because of that, your interest total is actually more than the taxes you're collecting from the community. Okay. Hence the reason why we start at 6.7% from operations, but we go down to a minus 0.8% for net income.
I'll just jump in real quick with this is basic accounting, but
sure.
But you see in the chart there, operating income, that's before you take into account non-operating expenses, and so and that's what Eric's saying. Below, as he's talking about above and below on an income statement. Lower in the income statement is usually where you find your non-operating expenses, and interest expense is one of those non-operating expenses. And once you apply that, your total change in net position changes, can go up or down, as Eric said. In other districts it goes up, but in our case it goes down. And that's why you see a difference between operating margin and the change in net position is that interest expense.
Correct. And then I just want to really pause here and you say, okay, we had a net loss of minus 0.8%, which was roughly around $400,000. That, well, it's a net loss. Reality, you look back, you see depreciation is 9.8%, which we didn't pay any money for that. just a non-cash item. So cash from operations for this year, the cash flow in the prior year was about a positive $650,000. This year was a positive $3.1 million. So if you look at that liquidity of cash and AR going up, that's because of the operations this year, which is great. Looking back at your feasibility study and their projection for you, so if you're going to build this hospital, this is what's going to happen going forward, you're actually better than that projection for this year. The first couple of years, you're not quite doing so well. A lot of hard work has gone into a lot of change, and you're now on track and or better. So projected cash flow under that feasibility study for 2017 was 2.3 million, and you're actually about 3.1 million. So you're about 800 grand better cash flow than was projected.
Could you tell us how declining depreciation credits, which, as I understand it, are declining every year, how that impacts us and what kind of threat that is as we cannot...
Well, a significant portion, yeah. I mean, it's a small decline for a while, and out there will be some decline. But with your depreciation, you get paid based on costs on a significant piece of your business. And to the extent that depreciation cost goes down, you'll end up being paid less, right? So as you go forward, right, operations need to improve, right, and create more cash and get more money out of the commercial and as providers as well. I mean, that's a goal, and that's part of the feasibility and something you need to work on. So the good news is you're in a position where you have a high depreciation right now, and that is helping you build reserves and allow you the ability to, as you go in the future, right, we're looking 15, 20 years out, right? Hopefully you've built, in these good times where you can build your cash reserves, you're going to use those to invest in other outpatient, other things that will provide cash flow for the facility, because we've got a lot of years, so we've got to make a nut every year and create cash flow to pay off that debt. So, yeah. This is a slide we've shown the last few years. And what this does is it takes tax levy rates as in cents per thousand of assessed value. And so during 2017, your taxes were, I think that number was like around 48.5 cents, I believe. So not the full 50, you didn't charge the full 50 cents that you're allowed. So you're 48.5 cents. All the other bars are every other district in the state. So comparatively speaking, what you're charging your community by assessed value is 48.5. So you can kind of see where you stand compared to the rest of the state. So
is that first bar real?
It really is real. They have a couple special elections. I think they built a hospital and a big facility, and they got a bunch of tax revenue the community paid for.
Can you tell us who that is?
I gave the list at the Odessa. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they really do pay $3 per thousand. So no, their homes are probably a lot less, so it's hard to match up perfectly. But it's a number, right? So yeah. So I think that's a good slide to see for your community. So income available for debt service. This number with your debt and your revenue bonds, the requirement is for this calculation to be $4.4 million every year till that debt's all paid off. If not, you're out of compliance. And as you recall, a couple of years ago, we were out of compliance in the first year. You had to bring in an expert, and you all kind of have to sit on the sideline and they tell you what to do, right? And so you're trying to avoid that. And this year we hit it, 5.7 million compared to 4.4. So hit it with a little bit of cushion, and you're now back on track, and you're in compliance with your bond covenants. You're on track with your feasibility, and it's 1 year. Keep it going. Here's my soapbox. How's that? Some other ratio comparisons just to show you. Snoqualmie is in the first column. Washington cause are in the middle column, and then the U.S. critical access are on the far right. So your operating margin, you're going to see you're definitely above. Then we kind of, as that previous conversation, to where they make a little money. Most district hospitals make a little money on that tax versus interest. And so you see they go up a little tick from 0.8 to 2.0, and you go down because of that debt. Current ratio, just ability to pay bills. You just want that above 1.0. You want your current assets to be enough to pay your current liabilities. You're at 2.2, which is a little lower than others. Age of plant is smoking great because you have a new facility and no one else does in general. So that's really the power of you. What you have right now in the power is you have a brand new plant. It's not going to cost you a lot of repairs and equipment and all that for a few years. So that really does allow you to kind of conserve that cash and build up that balance sheet. And, if you keep on doing what we did in 2017, that's a real positive move forward. Debt to capitalization is the other side. You have a new hospital, and you got a lot of debt to go with it. So, you have $1.26 of debt compared to every dollar of asset. So that's the other side. We need to use that age of plant over the next 20 years and such to turn that upside down. Right? So that's the goal, and that's the complicated side. And then
Debt to asset ratio, what is that?
I mean, what it says is kind of like, how well are you financed?
Yeah, but
right?
I realize that. But I mean, what is our debt to asset ratio? Is it?
You have $1.26 of liabilities for every dollar of asset you have, versus everyone else has about 37 cents of liability for every.
Does that include our revenue bonds?
Yeah, so that you got 95 million of debt, right? And so that's more than you have in assets.
How do we determine the value of the assets?
Just we audit those, right? It's the cash and investments based on what they're in the market, and fixed asset, right? So your fixed assets, it's amortized cost. So we're depreciating the building $9.8 million this year. Did it lose $9.8 million in value? My guess is it probably went up in value, right? But from my accounting perspective, I have to depreciate it because that's GAAP. So I can't really value. So technically, if you were to value the building, you might end up with a bigger number. But from what's reported under GAAP, which is really what everyone else has to do, that's where you stand.
I was thinking specifically about East Campus property, which we paid dearly for, and the value really hasn't been established. There's an estimate it's worth maybe around $4.5 million. We paid 11 or 10, I think, when everything's sorted out. But it also could be a tremendous asset if there's a change in the zoning.
Correct.
And the urban growth boundaries are changed and so forth. I'm just wondering, how do you value that kind of property that moves around?
I don't.
Can I cut in? I've had that question. It's a good question. And I said, well, how come we don't, we can't put down what the real value is? Well, because we can't, not in the accounting mode. If we were looking at fair market value to someone who wanted to buy it, I know that there was an offer, and at one point on that property that was well over 4.5. That was years ago.
I think that was 4.6.
But it's probably, that property, even as it is probably worth 6 or 7 million, and maybe more. I don't know. But we don't look, an accounting standpoint, we don't look at fair market value. I mean, it's like a 1969 Mustang GT 500 or 350. When you bought it, it was $3,500, right? And let's say you never did anything to it, and it just went to heck, right? But people still wanted it, and you want it even more. It might be worth $25,000, and it might be nothing but a piece of tin. And that's what the hospital could be worth in the future. We don't know.
Since we don't pay taxes, the county assessor does not put a value on that property. Is that right? That's true.
Yeah, that's true. We pay the,
so that would be a very good way of knowing what the value is.
So, I mean...
And what's the use going to be and all that?
Yeah.
Until something becomes certain, I can't even think about it. There's no certainty, so it stays where it is.
I think what you're getting at is, what are we valued at to another entity? property. That's what I've asked. If we had to do something like that, we'd probably get an appraiser, at some point, if somebody really wanted to purchase the property and close the deal at some future time.
And wouldn't that be a good thing to be able to show to a potential partner?
I've mentioned that several times, and yes, that is, and I think that it does cost a lot of money to do an appraisal on this kind of building, because it's kind of one.
But as
Your
I
partners
recall-
may do it themselves.
As I recall too, when we interviewed who was going to help us with affiliation, one of the things Steve said was that property was an asset, an underappreciated asset for us. I mean, so, and that could change, but right now it's there and it's an asset.
And you can't build this building right now for less than $50 million. We can build it for that much. I mean, even with all the equipment, the moving expense and everything.
Thank you.
Let's move on.
Okay, so then the last is just, you can see the outpatient. When we talked about you're very much inpatient centric compared to others, your outpatient revenue is around 47.5% of total, and other cause are 3/4 or more. So, Commissioner Norris,
Yes.
we do have some industry observations that are in the packet just to show, but I also want to ask you if, on time-wise, do you want me to go through these, or we just rather move forward? It's up to you.
I'm gonna let the board decide. Are we in favor of listening to, he's here. It seems to me appropriate to hear what he has to say.
Sure.
Yes.
Is that okay
I've
with the
heard
board?
it before, but I'd be really happy to have everyone hear about it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is that in the booklet you gave us?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
it
coming
is.
up. So.
Okay, go forward.
So the next slides are just some national hospital trends based on Moody's medians. And these are not really a fair comparison to you. They're rated hospitals, so they're the large rated hospitals where their bonds are actually being rated without insurance. And so they're, some of the larger hospitals throughout the nation. Within the slide, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see kind of the comparative percentages for critical access. So you look at, positive trend within the nation, going from, we were in the 4% excess margins and up to the 5%, and then really, up in the upper 5s and the 6%. That's, hundreds of billions of dollars of profits being put into the hospital system in the last 3 years, coming from the Affordable Care Act. And, there was kind of a hush before the storm of, it was last from 2009 through kind of those last years. Just, we don't know, is that going to impact us negatively, positively? It really was positively. It really took a lot of patients that were paying nothing under self-pay into the Medicaid system, and the hospitals are getting something for that, and that really had a real boost nationally. And that has helped in the market side. So it helped you get this building done, to be honest, right? Because in the past, you might have had, in 2011, 2010, our clients would go out for debt, and there might be one lender that would even listen to them. And now there's 4 or 5 that want to be part of it. So those little upticks are really, again, hundreds of billions of dollars, and that really has improved the marketplace. So just looking at kind of what that trend has been for the last several years, you really see that 2008, 2009, when the act was passed, and people just didn't know, there really was just a hold on cash. And so you look from 147 days of cash on average for these large hospitals up to 212 just a couple years ago. That is a lot of money not being reinvested into the hospital system nationally. And that's, again, there was just hush over the crowd. We didn't know what to do. And now you can see that 2016, they're starting to pay, they're starting to reinvest. And so we're seeing that kind of positive trend reinvestment. And again, this slide is the age of plant. When you look at, you're at 3.8 years of average. In 2009, it was about 9.8 years. And if you took that back to 1995, it was right around 9.7 to 9.9 forever. And then the law got passed. Hospitals didn't know what was going to happen. They really did stop investing in plant. And you can that creep up to 11.2 years versus 9.8 years is really a sign that just billions and billions of dollars have not been reinvested back in the plan. And even now that we see kind of some spending being done, most of that spending is on IT and outpatient service, outpatient equipment. So you're rare. You're actually invested in a new building, which most of America really isn't seeing in their community. And then again, that debt to capitalization, again, just not a lot of debt being taken, down, down, down. So that was a nice trend. And so this slide is kind of important. It's debt to cash flow and cash to debt. So again, you kind of see, back in 2009, for every dollar of debt, the average rate of hospital had $1.05 of cash and investments. In 2016, they had $1.57. So they could pay their debt and still have 57 cents left over, which is, just a trend of, again, not being reimbursed. The debt to cash flow is one that it's an important one to rating agencies, and it's the one where I've been talking a little too positive for the last half hour, so I'm going to change. So what this does is it says, what is the stress on operations caused by your debt? And what it does is it says, by all the cash I received from my operations, and all I did was use it to pay debt down, how quickly could I pay my debt? And so these large rated hospitals, which you're talking about, your Providences, your Swedishes, your Overlakes, these are the people, the multi-cares, this is who we're talking about, right? They could pay their debt off in less than 3 years if they just took their cash from operations and just paid the debt. 3 years, it's all gone. Yours is 30, right? What does that mean? And it's structured, and we have a feasibility that says we can do it. What's it mean? It means when I say you need to make $4.4 million every year, you need to make $4.4 million every year, right? You don't have a lot of cushion there, right? You can't afford to have a couple of years where you're producing negative cash. It's just not going to work because that debt is there and it needs to be paid. And so that's my word to the board. Great year, keep it going, and be diligent, please.
You understand that's not totally within our control because
Understand?
we have a recession.
I understand.
And when the recession, if a recession comes, we still have to meet those obligations.
That's really
Correct.
what I'm saying.
So,
Correct.
what then?
You
better have a big cushion, right?
need to have a cushion. You need to be doing well as best as you can year after year and looking into it. And if you need to cut costs somewhere, you need to make some tough decisions, that may come upon the board, right? It may be, there might be some years where we would like to provide all this service to the community and we cannot. Those are the things that can happen in a recession and such. And so those are hard decisions that you need to make, and you are where you are, and you just have to understand that and move forward and do the best you can.
Thank you,
Okay.
Eric. Are there any other
Great.
questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We've always appreciated our relationship with Snoqualmie Valley. I was looking at Skagit stuff the other day. So with Snoqualmie, and thank you very much to the board.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yes, moving on. Next is CEO compensation plan consultation proposal from Compensation Connections Action. So who is addressing?
Are we going to have committee reports?
Oh,
not yet.
well, yeah, we
So A, B.
This is still part of finance.
this is still part of finance.
Yep.
These are action items in finance.
I just, yeah. See if it can be.
Under committee reports.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay, so we had A, now we're down to B. And we're down to C.
I think that business about the consultant is a separate item on the agenda. So I don't think it should be considered as part of the finance committee report. Isn't that true, Mr. President,
No, he made a presentation, he came to the finance committee, talked to the finance committee first, so it was the finance committee that we have it under.
But it's a separate item on the agenda, so I think we need to deal with it there.
Hey, can I comment on
Yeah.
that? Yeah, so you have two items that may seem similar. You have the item under the Finance Committee report, and that's item B, which is the proposal from Compensation Connections, which is to take a look at receiving outside expert consultation regarding CEO compensation. So the question there is whether or not the organization should engage the firm Compensation Connections
Oh, I see.
in order to get information about how to structure a compensation package for the CEO. They also provide comparative data, as Commissioner Spiker was talking about.
Okay.
The other thing on the agenda that also relates to to me is the CEO evaluation form, and that's
We've got the other form on there, don't we? Let's see here.
okay. I'm just drawing a distinction between two items on the agenda. So one is about consultation regarding compensation. The other is about selecting one of the forms for my evaluation that were provided.
That's under new
And
business.
so they are actually two very distinct items on the agenda.
Yes.
Madam President,
Commissioner Pollard.
I feel uncomfortable that this was broached in the Finance Committee rather than in the board, at the board meeting, the first time. Once it gets I realize the Finance Committee is very receptive of things like this and
Which this
consultants.
are you referring to? You're talking about?
I'm referring to what is being proposed now, I think is on the table, which is the discussion about engaging a consulting firm to establish some kind of performance-based compensation. I believe that whole question should have started in the board itself, not the Finance Committee.
Can I,
Yes, you can.
may I make a,
Commissioner Spiker.
thank you. This was brought up at the last board meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
We went over
Presented.
it as a board.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that it was first introduced the prior month in the Finance Committee
No.
and came with a head of steam into the board meeting.
No, that's not correct.
That's
Commissioner
not,
Pollard.
Yeah, Commissioner
you know
Pollard.
what, let's get this correct,
Let's
Commissioner.
get it correct.
Because you
No,
can't.
let's not make a personal attack.
I'm not, I'm
excuse
just
me.
saying.
The
Don't say
board-
you, let's just talk about the issue.
Order.
All right, Commissioner Pollard, if I may, this was brought up for the first time at the board meeting, and I told everybody to take a look at it. We were told, we weren't given this at all, I don't think in the board, in the finance.
No.
We just heard it was coming, and because we voted as a board
Yes.
3 months ago to do this, I suggested that we take a look at it. It will be on the agenda this month. So as far as ramming it down anyone's throat or whatever you
I
phrase
didn't
it,
use that term.
okay, well, whatever, but same
Point of
difference.
order.
No, not a point of
I will
order.
not recognize point of order until we let Commissioner Spikers finish, and then somebody else may speak.
I suggest you go back to
The chair will
the
recognize
Point of
prior
order,
board.
Madam Chairman, I think when a point of order is
You're
raised,
interrupting
you have to
again.
interrupt.
You're always interrupting.
Commissioner Pollard, would you?
Now,
put
that's
up-
another attack and
The
bullying that I had to put up with from Mr. Spikers.
Would you please address the chair and the chair?
That's what I was
asked-
trying to do. I called for a point of order.
All right, so there's a point of order, Madam President, so Mr. Pollard should be able to address the point of order. You will rule on his point of order and then move on with Commissioner Spikers as appropriate. You need to hear what his point of order is.
So we stopped listening to.
Just for
I thought the
momentarily-
chair was recognizing Commissioner
I
Spikers.
understood you recognized him, but a parliamentary procedure does allow for a point of order, but you don't know what the point of order is. You may
Okay.
simply say, you're out of order, Mr. Pollard, and I'm not going to listen to your point of order, but you need to at least hear that.
Okay.
first.
Commissioner Pollard.
Factually, this was initially introduced in the Finance Committee when it should have been initially introduced into the board. That's my point of order. Therefore, what I'm objecting to is some false information about when this began and where it was introduced. It was introduced into the Finance Committee, not the board. Then it got a head of steam and came to the board.
That's
Can
an
I get a point of
argument. That's
clarification?
not a point of order. What is the point of order
A
specifically?
point of order is constant bullying and personal attacks from
That's
Mr.
not-
Spikers. That's a point of order.
I think you can move on. Decorum in debate, you're supposed to all refrain from attacking the member's motives, not addressing the member, and not make comments about the member's motives. All your remarks should go through the chair. You should avoid the use of members' names. You should refrain from speaking adversely on prior actions or prior meetings that occurred. So I think the point of order now has been heard. I think you can move on with Commissioner Spiker's statements, and I just remind you the decorum requirements.
Commissioner Spikers?
Yeah, thank you. As a matter of fact, I disagree as to when this came up. This came up at the last board meeting. We were told about it in the finance meeting, but we didn't know any of the specifics. We didn't know anything, and we didn't know anything about the costs, anything like that. My understanding, and the fact that the board voted about 90 days to 20 days ago, I think, to move on to get an independent person to determine a compensation structural package for the CEO. And I believe it's by law has to be independent. So that the board as a whole did vote unanimously. So I'm not sure where this is coming from, I guess, and that's the record.
Does anybody else have a comment?
Yeah, may I comment for the record?
The chair recognizes Commissioner Herring.
Thank you. My recollection, this was brought up at the initial item was brought up in our last board meetings, and I specifically remembered some of the questions I asked the lady when she was presenting this to us. And so, yes, it wasn't brought up the first time at the Finance Committee, it was at the board meeting. Thank you. I just wanted
Is
to
there any more
clarify.
discussion? It sounds like, okay, then we will move on with looking at the document. And I was not at the board meeting, the last board meeting, so I don't have any recollection of what happened. Commissioner Young, do you have something to say?
No,
Okay.
move on forward.
Yeah, moving
All
forward.
right, so moving forward, I call for a motion.
On what?
Okay.
So I call for a motion to right now to look at the CEO compensation plan consultation and a proposal from the Compensation Connections Action.
That should be a separate item, Madam. I don't see that on the agenda.
We have Finance Committee, and this is coming from the
Right there.
Finance Committee. We just did Moss Adams, and now
It's
we're
on the
down at
agenda.
yeah, it's on the agenda.
Okay, I make a
There's where you
motion.
have a problem again, that this should be new business and not part of the committee agenda. So.
But it was adopted as your
Madam
agenda,
yeah.
as an
Madam
action item
It has
in
been
that
approved.
position on the agenda
Yeah.
under the committee report.
Yes, it was.
So you should proceed with it, and then we need to address in the future how this might be arranged.
Okay.
All right, so we have it as an action item, correct? Or no, the CEO plan, it's an action item. Is there any discussion about it?
I have one question.
Yes,
I want to
Commissioner
know
Young.
how much it's going to cost us.
I think, if I recall, it was like 3,000.
Oh, I didn't need enough print.
Yeah, there we
Thank
go,
you.
3,600. See, I remember. I remember
That's
all
pretty
these
close.
things.
Not your fee.
3,600. So I
Okay.
remember
Thank
vividly
you.
all this. That's why
You were chair.
I don't quite understand what.
You were the chair. All right, so do we,
Discussion, please.
yes, what discussion? Do you have comment?
I think Mr. Spiker's point earlier was well taken, and that is, if you look at the proposal, they're planning to do a lot of comparison with national surveys and so forth. The problem is, this hospital is unique. It may be the only hospital in the nation where all inpatient beds, with maybe one or two exceptions, are swing beds. I think that is correct. So the point is, there is no real comparison out there. Using national surveys will not tell us anything concrete. Furthermore, we have more of a local labor market for this kind of position. And I think we can do our own checking, survey, by checking with other critical access hospitals in the state of Washington. As far as comparison and so forth, we can probably also get some pretty darn good performance incentive plans. But very frankly, I think with a 25-bed hospital, you don't need a performance. I don't think we need to shovel more money into the CEO's pocket. I think that we're representing the public here, and if the public knew that we were going to spend about $4,000 and then make national comparisons, rather than simply do comparisons of our own with other comparable hospitals, they would be concerned about our willingness to avoid hiring consultants needlessly. We can do this ourselves. We don't need to spend $4,000 plus staff time and the board time and all of that to bring in a person that's going to be making these national comparisons. We have a unique hospital here,
Okay.
and we need to make comparable comparisons.
Somebody else want to speak to the action item? Any other commissioner? Commissioner Herring?
I think we need to move on and take action on B. And I also would like to comment that we should limit our comments to at least 4 minutes for sake of time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Limit our comments to what?
To no more than 3 to 4 minutes for sake of time.
Point of order. The Roberts Rules of Order state that when you're recognized that you should have up to 10 minutes.
And I didn't recognize you, Commissioner Pollard. I had recognized Commissioner Herring. So.
No, when I was speaking, she's complaining about this.
Yeah, but you
all right, may I be recognized?
Not quite yet, please. Is there anything else you have to say, Commissioner Herring?
Let's move on.
Okay. Commissioner Pollard, do you
Well, I just want to
chair?
remind everybody, and we haven't followed this, the Roberts Rules of Order says that when you're recognized, you should be given 10 minutes. And if with small boards and small groups, more, or maybe more, that's the way I think they put it. Is that right?
I think they allow, it's permissive to go beyond that. In informal or smaller boards, the president can grant additional time by permission or request. I think, though, to be clear, Commissioner Herron's was only a suggestion that you should limit your comments to 4. She was not directing that you must be limited to that. So, Madam President, you can move on.
Is there any other comments? Somebody, Commissioner
I'm
Young?
just reading off of this. It says the dimensions used for comparisons will be variety and scope of services of each organization with a focus on critical access hospitals with comparable swing beds. And that's as far as I'm going.
Look at the other comparisons.
Are there any other comments from the board? So if I understand this correctly, this is an action item to approve working with this company?
You would be authorizing staff
right.
under Steve to engage this firm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, authorize, I'm sorry, can't hear you. We don't have
Authorizing
application.
staff to get in touch with this company and use their services?
Yes.
Are you saying enter into a contract
Yes.
with this company? Is
Yes.
that what we're doing?
Yes, that is what we're doing. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to put it to a vote?
I make the motion to put it to a vote.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Herron, second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll all vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Thank you.
A roll call vote, please.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
President Norris,
Aye.
Vice President Herron,
Aye.
Secretary Spikers,
Aye.
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollard.
No.
Thank you. Moving on, we are now at approval of the warrants and
No,
payroll.
we did it already.
Okay,
It was
so
switched.
switched. Okay, so that's been approved and that's been approved. I don't know who's going to do the medical report. Commissioner
Joan.
Young?
Yeah,
Yes.
don't know.
We met on June the 5th, so some of this has been updated by, for instance, Mr. Parker's report. We will be providing first aid services at Red, White, and Boom, the July 4th event. Crafting a message for public display, inviting patients to make us aware if they feel their access to care has been restricted in some way due to a bias, as we want to correct it immediately. And we're also establishing a relationship with the Hearing, Speech, and Deaf Center for tactile interpretation when it's needed. The Stop the Bleed program was going to be taught to our clinic staff this month, and I think this is a typo, and to Riverside School District. I think it might be Riverview.
Correct.
School District in late summer. In the lab, the BF2 coagulation analyzer is being prepped for implementation, and the new Friends of Youth Clinic will be ready to initiate as soon as they get their IT solutions in place.
What does that mean? Ready to initiate? A clinic?
Yes,
for
it's a clinic.
youth?
I can speak to that. The Friends of Youth organization and us have been working on having our staff cross place so that our medical providers can provide service within their clinic, and their behavioral health providers can provide services here. And it really helps youth to be able to feel like they're not going to a place that's just for behavioral health. And it's about behavioral and medical care integration.
Oh, that's really great. Friends of Youth have been around for many, many years in the valley here. So
Yeah, we're really excited. In fact, I have on my desk all the bullet points preparing for the news release to let the community know about what we're doing together.
great. All right.
Okay, that pretty much completes my report. I will say that we do have, Dr. Woodcup was kind enough to give us a copy of the revised pre-hospital stroke triage tool, evaluation updates, and also from our work study session in July of 2017, the credentialing, privileging, and medical staff membership process.
Yes. I really appreciate that that's there because I missed that meeting. So that's really helpful for me. Is there any questions for Commissioner Young? Yes, Commissioner Pollard.
Rural health clinic, we make ourselves eligible for survey, etc. What is that all about?
That is a reclassification of both the hospital-based clinic and the Snoqualmie Ridge Medical Clinic to what's called rural health clinic status. It provides us with favorable Medicare reimbursement. It's only available if Medicare deems you as a hospital shortage, provider shortage area, HIPSA. And so once they deemed this area a HIPSA, then we were eligible to apply for rural health clinic status.
Is this a medical shortage area?
It is.
I'm amazed.
Are there any other questions?
Regarding system-wide, up here it says culture of patient safety and employee satisfaction. What about patient satisfaction? Where does our next report on that come?
That comes in your quarterly quality report. The HCAP scores, the CGCAP scores, that's part of the quality report.
And that will be due when?
I'd have to take a look at the
Okay.
schedule.
Next
But
month.
all right, thank you.
Are we quarterly on that
We're
committee?
quar-
That's
we
a
are
quarterly committee.
it's a quarterly update to the
Yeah.
board too.
Yeah, I know that. I just was wondering where we're going to hear from them.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to facilities committee. Thank you, Joan. Commissioner Young.
So,
Commissioner Pollard?
Yes, thank you very much. There are 3 pages here, and they're all out on the table. And especially since I've spoken so much today, I want to cut the time. So I'm just going to mention a couple of things. One thing has sort of been mentioned, which is the HVAC system. And I believe that was mentioned also in the Finance Committee report. We only want to mention these things once, but apparently we've come up with a good solution there whereby by extending our lease for 5 years, they're going to pay for it. The owner is going to pay for the HVAC system improvement. Any more to add on that, Tom?
Only that we'll be bringing the lease agreement to both the Finance and the Facilities Committee meetings in the next meetings, because it is it's a real estate transaction, and we want the board in both committees to see that.
Very good, very good. Tom, you gave a report from the Economic Development Committee. I think the Panorama Apartment project is going to be very important. It's going to impact the hospital in many ways positively, but in a few ways negatively, like I'm thinking of traffic and so forth. Would you like to say something more about the Panorama Apartment project?
Yes, certainly. It's a 191 unit project that's just behind the hospital. It is expected to start construction this summer. I did receive a inquiry from the developer from Panorama about providing an easement so that their construction vehicles can enter into the site through our, what I call the ring road, and that's the road that's just right outside this window, that our delivery vehicles, large trucks are already using that road. They would like to, in fact, there's one right now. They would like to be able to use that road as well to bring in trucks onto the site. And so I'm still waiting for them to send the easement agreement for our review. The project's pretty exciting. Of course, it's providing some additional housing to the area. There's a lot more that's needed, but we'll take anything that we can get. And for some of our employees, it could be very helpful. I know there are a lot of area businesses that are excited about being able to have this opportunity for their staff to be able to live and work in the same community.
Thank you very much. Excellent report. As I say, there are lots of detailed items in this report, and I urge you to, if you haven't read them, take a look. But one of the things that we constantly deal with is the issue of traffic, access and egress, and things like, can we get groove pavement? Can we get a sign that says the speed limit is 35 or 25 or whatever, and you're exceeding the speed limit, blink, blink, and that sort of thing. We were at every meeting, we try to deal with traffic quieting, because it's really an issue of safety for our patients and visitors. So Tom, working closely with the city of Snoqualmie, and I feel we're making progress, but I'm not seeing some of these things actually happening, like the texturing of the road and the
Explain what kind of texturing of the road.
Well, are you familiar with what's being done, or what is done down there in Fall City as you approach Fall City from Carnation?
Oh, the bumps?
No, well, I wouldn't call them bumps. They dig out little pieces in the road. It's not a bump. I call it texturing. What do you call it?
They feel like a rubber. It's still a
rumble
strip.
Rumble strip.
Well,
sort of thing.
are you talking about the rumble strips on the right-hand side outside? So,
No, they go all the way across the lane.
well, I've driven that road a lot. It's not the same as traffic calming, and that's probably what you need, is some traffic calming strips along, so that it will slow them down.
That's what these are designed to do. They're
Okay.
yeah,
That's what you would call them.
They actually are grooves in the pavement that go across the entire lane of traffic.
Okay.
I've even seen those things, I-5 headed toward 520, the off-ramp there,
Yeah.
trying to slow the traffic down. And of course, that's a real safety issue here. So I won't take any more time unless there are questions. But because it's all, I think, very well recorded in our minutes. And so thank you, Valerie, for that. So any questions?
I do have
Yes,
one.
sir.
Are we going to be, is the lease extension, are we paying for an increase in lease costs too, or what?
As we'll show you in both committees, the lease is due to expire within the next couple of years. And Steve's done a great job working with the owner, actually with the management
Property manager.
company, to get a lease extension at the
Current price, isn't it?
actually, well, it's consistent with under the current lease, I'll go back, under the current lease, we have had price escalations occur in every year of the lease, and the extension is consistent with that, so it's just a continuation of the kind of lease that we have had.
Meaning that we'll still get
There's
increases
still
every
price
year.
increases,
No.
but it's not.
No? This is important.
We'll get our regularly scheduled increase, I believe it's 2020. Don, you remember? Anyway, it goes on we get our regularly scheduled rent increase, which is our current agreement.
How much of an increase is it?
It's about 2.3.
2.3%?
It's an overall, if you it's about a 2.3% increase
Per annum.
per annum.
Per annum?
Yep.
But if you extend it longer,
Does it go down?
does it drop?
It's the same.
It's
still the same?
Year to year.
Oh.
Consistent with the lease that we have had.
Consistent with our current lease. And they will then pay the $19,000 to upgrade the
To upgrade the HVAC?
Correct.
Could you, at the finance meeting and the facilities meeting, I'm sure the same, get the differences between the two
Yeah,
leases?
I'll show you the analysis I've done.
Okay,
Steve's done a really nice side-by-side on that.
okay,
We've got a side-by-side.
all right.
We originally thought the HVAC would cost $10,000, but it was going to cost $19,000, I believe. And therefore, this is a great advantage to the district.
Correct. Originally, we thought we could do some of the electrical work and keep the cost down, and after Scott took another look at it, he realized we needed to have the contractor do that electrical work as well.
Oh, that's what it was, okay.
Oh, so the old adage when I brought it up, constructive eviction, helped out in getting a little negotiated settlement.
I won't comment on that.
What was the original term of the lease?
You've outstripped my memory of my read on the lease, but it
Yes.
was multiple years. It was,
Multiple years?
it's got to be at least, pardon,
I believe it was 5 with multiple options.
5 year.
5 year
Well, it was
lease.
long. It was, anyway,
Yeah.
it was a pretty long-term
Oh,
lease.
and has it always been 2.2% every year?
I'd have to look
Oh,
at
okay.
Steve's
We'll
spreadsheet on that.
look at it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The other thing, if no one else has a question, I have one other question.
The chair recognizes Commissioner Spikers.
Thank you. When these trucks come in and out of to build the Panorama Apartments project, they're going to go through our property.
No, it's not our property they're going through.
Oh, it's not.
They would come up this road.
They come up this road, which
That's
is
our
not
property.
our property.
Actually, it is.
Oh, you're
96?
talking about the one coming up this
Right,
direction?
the one right up, that's when.
Yeah, so you have an easement then.
Oh, okay.
So
Right
do
off
they
the
have
roundabout.
already,
Yeah,
I recall that they had an easement for that already, or we
So
gave an easement away.
yeah, I
There,
think
there's actually another easement, and that,
Okay.
and that's over here, not related to this.
Okay, so this is the second, are we charging for this?
No, we're not. We're
Yeah.
happy that they're
Good
building
neighbors.
that project and being really good neighbors.
why not make money out of it?
Well, that's what I was thinking. You know, easements do cost money, and
Yeah.
when you use, even if it's temporary,
For-
are the,
For a small fee,
yeah, I
Why
mean,
not?
maybe a donation to
a
the hospital.
donation, yeah, to the hospital.
That's great advice, and I
Yeah.
will discuss that with them when they.
Because
That
it
would be
seemed to me
nice.
that if they don't have this easement,
They will not be.
yeah, it's gonna be tough for them, so I would think
They,
that,
they
They
actually
would.
can access the property via Jacobia, but there are issues with that as well.
well, yeah, that the neighbors wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
And they would probably shut them down. So I would think
So they would
that
like
we
to
should be able to
negotiate
get
with
some
them.
money for this.
Yeah.
I think
Or
that's
a
an
donation.
excellent
Yeah, or
idea.
donate
And-
some.
And,
May I ask that one
So-
commissioner at a time please speak, instead of all three, at least, sorry, Joe.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
The
I
chair
want to say
recognizes
that, and I was
Commissioner
going to
Pollard.
buttress what Mr. Spikers was saying in that it really depends upon the funding. It is possible that this may be government funding and that very, very easily accommodate some kind of access fee. So at any rate, let's look into that, see if we might get some kind of benefit there. Whether it's a contribution or built into a government-sponsored contract.
Okay. Is there anything else from Facilities Committee?
That completes our report, and if there are no other questions, that's the end.
Okay, now we have the Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. The committee met for its 5th meeting and continues to work on the following. We've had quite a bit of discussion that we were covering. We were given another binder because the first binder is almost getting filled up. So we met this afternoon, and the following that we were working on were creating 2 governing documents, one of which would be the bylaws pertaining to organizational issues of the hospital district, and the other is the rules of procedure for the hospital district, and we talked about that previously, how we went about, setting aside which one goes to, belongs to the bylaws and which one belongs to the rules of or procedures. So the proposed amendments that are being reviewed pertaining to requests from the Facilities Committee pertaining to the committee. We also talk about proposed amendments that were reviewed from Commissioner Spikers pertaining to the utilization of the Robert Rules of Order. Commissioner Young's raised the questions and provided suggestions that we have to review pertaining to the elections of board officers and term limits. Additionally, the committee is reviewing specific issues that are being researched further by the committee. They are as follows: a potential preamble to the rules of procedures, conflicts of interest, code of conduct, excused and unexcused absences of commissioners. These are some of the issues that were brought up in our previous board meetings. And the other items that we also included are seating protocols, which we really don't have that in print. Seating protocols, seating protocols, because we don't really have any of that that's in print or in written form. Also, the other items that we will be looking at is a template for charter for all the committees. Right now, only the medical and the facilities committee have a charter. So that's another piece of work that we need to do in the next month. It's been a pretty, what I would say, it's a lengthy discussion because there's so much, to cover, the language that we need to use to make sure that we are concise and accurate. So I'm not gonna say anymore because we will be able to present this to you hopefully by the time we have completed our work. So, and any other
Are there any questions?
questions? Yeah, thank you.
From commissioners? Commissioner Pollard.
I think Mr. Spikers made a suggestion to the committee that we all got copies of. The thing that I'm concerned about is I think I sent to you, Commissioner Herron, a question about whether we're going to have rules of procedure and so forth, and I never got a response. And I'm just wondering, we're asked to submit ideas and questions and so forth. How do we do that where we have 2 different buckets and we're not sure, does this go in this bucket or that bucket or
Well, I think, if I remember, we did talk about, we reviewed the bylaws, the existing bylaws, and we looked at to see which of the items on the bylaws ought to go to the rules rules of procedures and what goes on the bylaws. And we even indicated, I believe, B for bylaws, O for order, what is it? And we have discussed that already. So, and that if you were to have any more questions, you would have submitted that, and I think you did.
Yeah, I just recall that
And
when
that's
we
why
went through this process before,
Yes.
Jay Rodney, who was in charge of that largely in terms of writing it up, gave us interim reports. He gave us a set of bylaws that were marked up with colored changes.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And we're not seeing any of that now. I think it would be helpful if we could get interim drafts and somehow not just wait to the very end and say, here it is.
No,
The committee wanted to approach it holistically rather than piecemeal, so that rather than having you approve one piece at a time, is to put the full package together, and then as you view it, it can be sliced and diced. But the committee has a holistic approach where they want to review everything. And so if you have a suggestion, they'll make a discretionary decision as to should that go in the rules and the procedures side, or should it go over in the bylaws? And then it's all going to come back to the board, and the board can say, we think you put it in the wrong bucket, and then we will have a discussion about moving it. But I think the committee really wanted to approach it much more holistically, and they're taking on a lot of issues. We discussed 6 different specific issues that they had me research last meeting, and they gave me 4 more for our next meeting. So I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner Pollard, but I think their approach is not to try and give you a little piece at a time, but give you the full package to look at, and then you can take it apart if you need to.
May I respond then?
Oh, absolutely.
Or you're asking me if that satisfied me?
No, I'm wondering if I was clear in my explanation. I want to make sure I tried to answer your question.
I'm not totally clear, because I'm not asking for piecemeal submissions. When Jay Rodney would give us a draft of the changes, we saw the whole thing with changes marked in red or whatever, so we could quickly identify the whole bylaws proposal and what changes are being proposed. I think we ought not to wait until the very end, and it's not word that sounds very good, holistic. Maybe the best thing would be for me to send you a copy of the bylaws in process when Jay Rodney was doing it, because I think that it was very good.
Understood. I'll pass that on to the committee. The committee is already doing red line strikeouts, and we do have red line strikeouts. But their decision at this point is not to bring those back to the board until the entire document is ready.
Well, I think the board might want to see it in the process.
I'll pass that on.
So I may send you a copy of the Rodney markup.
Understood. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment. Commissioner Pollard, I think the board would then need to vote. If you're saying the board, I think right now you're speaking for yourself. However, one thing I would like to agree with Commissioner Pollard is that last time when we went over review, it was 2 meetings late at night. So I would hope the one advantage to getting something ahead, at least sections ahead, is it would avoid that long night and 2 or 3 meetings where we had a lot of debating and a lot of discussion that became pretty lengthy. So that would be my concern. But
one of the consideration that we did also was that we were all asked to review the existing bylaws and make your comments and submit them. And I know you sent one about conflict of interest.
Send something.
You sent one to me about conflict of interest, and that is part of the work that we are looking into, because that was one of the issues that you have. So, we have our old bylaws that we can comment if we see something that's irregular or whatever. And so this is the opportunity. I think that's the consideration that the board have requested from the commission to at least give us your input.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner Pollard?
I think you made a very good point about having late night meetings and struggling over these things
because there was so much.
Because I think we should remember that there were no bylaw revisions from 2008 until 2012. It's supposed to be done every 2 years. 2010 was missed. 2012, there were bylaw revisions that were finally published in 2013. And then the point is, it was December of 2012 or even January of 2013, if we can work that in. So we have until the end of the year to get this done and be on schedule. And then we will have done something that prior boards didn't do, and that was do bylaw revisions every 2 years. We'll be back on track, but we will be back on track if we get this done by the end of the year or even January in terms of every 2-year revision. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollard.
I'm going to say it will be done before the end of the year.
Thank you, Commissioner Young.
We're meeting we met before this meeting, we met before the last board meeting, and we'll meet again. And we've got our work cut out for us.
I believe it. Thank you. We have no old business. We do have new business. And the new business is our CEO evaluation forms. Did the commissioners take time to look at those and decide what form they preferred?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're gonna vote on it.
I think we have 3 different forms here.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion or any thoughts on these forms?
I think simple is best.
AHA. American Hospital Association, AHA, seems to be something that consistent to our mission. Also, if you're looking at qualitative and quantitative, I think it covers that, and it's not so convoluted. I don't know, at least that's
Oh, they have turned.
the second, I believe that's, yeah.
And that's how many pages? That's about.
Yeah, 7, 8 pages, or maybe, no,
That's
9.
American Association
10,
is.
11.
Huh?
American Hospital Association.
It has
22
22
pages.
pages.
11 pages.
No, 22 for the American Hospital Association.
When I was reading it, I thought it was only,
No,
okay.
actually, yeah, 22.
And then there's the Iowa.
And then there's the CEO evaluation from the Iowa Hospital Association.
I like the Iowa one because it's short.
Oh, is it because
Well,
you're
you know,
turning?
and I liked the other one that we used last
Okay.
year, which is short also, and I just wanted to see if we
Last
could compare last year's to this year.
Yeah.
It would be nice to be able to do that, and I think each one of them has comments section, so
Oh, okay.
that's kind of
I
a
agree
plus
too.
to me, to be able to have some comments.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah, I guess that's it.
So we have, the first
Yeah,
one is
this
the
is
American
good.
Hospital, let's see, I gotta make sure I got this right.
No, the first ones are
Oh,
old.
Commissioner Pollard, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a
Sample
question,
one.
and that is, how many
That's
commissioners downloaded and printed out these options? I'm asking the board. How many have
This is
you
a lot for me to
downloaded
print.
and
I did
printed
not
these out?
download it.
no, I didn't.
I read it.
And the purpose of the question
I
is
just-
that we did not download. I think that probably commissioners would admit that they did not download and print out about 50 pages, which means that we got those tonight only. And what I'm saying is, to really study these, this should be in a work session or something where we actually drill down on these. As far as last year's evaluation form was concerned, the board did not choose that. This is the first time in the history of the district that the board is being given an opportunity to select the instrument. And I appreciate Mr. Parker's somehow guidance or whatever it is that
It
brought this
wasn't
about.
Mr. Parker, it was me. It was me from last year because it was one we rushed into it and did only one. And I feel strongly that it is not the president's job to evaluate the CEO. The board as a whole is responsible for the CEO. And that's why I really feel strongly we all need to decide what we're going to use and we all need to do the evaluation.
Yeah.
And
Can I just make one quick comment? And that-
Sure.
And I appreciate the accolades, and I pass it along to Commissioner Norris, or President Norris, and Steve, because I've done the wall
He
here
has.
and really not had any impact on it.
What I'm going to suggest, if I may, is I think the public speaker made a point that we did not hear the 2017 list of accomplishments or accomplishments to date because we ran out of time at a meeting. And I would like to suggest that we bring that into a work session along with studying these three options. In other words, we need, in addition to a work study session where we take actions and so forth, we're doing like Evergreen Health does, Evergreen Public Health District, and that is an educational session. And this would be an educational session to drill down on picking the right instrument.
Well, I think there's more to it than that. And one is that we are responsible, legally responsible, to do an evaluation within a certain length of time. And I think we're already kind of pushing the envelope. Steve, do you know when he's up for an evaluation? Isn't it
June, I believe.
Have that in front of me.
Yeah, I think
It's June.
June
or July.
It is June.
It's June.
It is June.
Yeah.
I mean, June is the contract anniversary.
Okay.
Correct.
So
And
we
logically, that would be when an evaluation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we really need to take this. I didn't print it, but I went through it online.
Yeah.
And my preference this year is to redo the one last year. One, it's short, and two, to do a comparison between the two, because we have that already. So we can do that one and then compare it this year to how we feel based on, we do it this year, and then we can look at, is there improvement, is there not improvement? It gives us some kind of comparison. That's my thought.
Madam President, since we have 3 sets of these forms in our, in front of us, and even though we did not download it or print them out, I think we have ample opportunity to read them and compare them. So your suggestion about using the sample, the first one that we did from last year, I think looks good. It covers both qualitative and quantitative measurements. So I think, and I'm sorry that I realized when I was reading, I thought the Hospital Association, AHA, was a little, but I was just because of their graphs was just small print. Yeah, and I was reading the entire, I said, this would work okay. But yes, I agree with your assessment of the first form.
I'm in favor of that. I'd like the comparison. Again, as long as I get some, be able to make some of my own comments.
And I think that's allowable on that form. Yeah. Commissioner Young?
Well, I like that form. If we went to another one, it'd be the Iowa one, because I like short and don't have to write a book.
Okay. So your first form is what we did last year. Your second opinion would be the Iowa. Okay. Which would probably be where I am exactly.
Yeah,
Commissioner
me too.
Pollard.
I'm very opposed to the one we used last year. This is just another status quo. It's easier to approve what we've done in the past. That's a terrible evaluation form, in my opinion. And I think I'm very sensitive to this because we wasted $100,000 because we did not handle the performance evaluation of the prior superintendent in the proper way, and as a result, we ended up paying 2
Point of order that goes to a past issue.
This is relevant to the need to do this right this time.
Commissioner Pollard, I do believe the book of order, the Robert's Rules of Order says you cannot go back to old decisions and bring those up when discussing something that we're
I don't think
discussing.
there's any such thing.
The Robert's Rules of Order say you are to refrain from speaking adversely on prior action not pending. In debate, a member cannot reflect adversely on any prior act of the society that is not then pending, unless a motion to reconsider, rescind, or amend it is pending, or unless he intends to conclude his remarks by making or giving notice of one of those motions. So, not having a motion pending, that isn't prior action that should not be addressed at this time.
That is, unless I have the intention to offer a motion to what? Say that again.
Unless you are offering a motion to rescind a prior motion.
No, I think at the end you said something different.
Or unless he intends to conclude his remarks by making or giving notice of one of these motions. One of these motions would have been a motion to reconsider, rescind, or amend. There was no, prior, there's no
Okay.
motions.
Thank you, I won't debate the point because we're running out of time. But I do believe that we need more time to study these and not just do a knee-jerk reaction and take last year's because it's a status quo and a sort of a default. We need to look at the district from a new viewpoint, and part of that is the instrument we use to evaluate the performance of the superintendent.
Well, seeing as we haven't used any really performance thing in the last several years prior to my being elected, when I looked, they were just written statements that he did or didn't do a good job. I think this is only the second year we've actually had something where all the commissioners can look at it and give an evaluation. And I think it would totally be appropriate next year, after we've used this twice, to reach out and see if there isn't something different we might want to use. But for doing this methodology of looking and giving scores and looking at it the next year, that gives us at least an opportunity to compare. And that's my opinion, and I don't know how others feel. But I guess, is there further discussion?
I have another point, but I'll leave the other commissioners to discuss.
All right.
Commissioner Young has something. Commissioner Young.
As for printing out or whatever, I sat and looked at it on the computer. I'm not much for printing out things, and that's where my decision came from.
Okay. All right. So do I have a motion?
As mentioned, I had a point, but I wanted to hear from others.
Yes, Commissioner Pollard.
So do others want to make a comment?
Yeah, it's really not your call. If you do not want to address, if you don't want permission from the chair to say something, then I will ask if there's anybody else.
What I would like to say is...
May I say something?
Well, that's what I was
Yeah,
trying
sorry.
to get done.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Herron.
Thank you. I feel a little offended when the discussion goes into where it is a status quo again. It is not. We have been discussing this for several times in our meetings, and so it is not a status quo. It's not a rubber stamping board, as you indicated. So I think that we are mature enough, we're not juveniles here, that we do know what we're doing. So I appreciate if we can move forward.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I did not use the word rubber stamping.
I know, but I use that word. But
I think that this was a kind of personal attack. We can have differences on policies.
Commissioner Pollard, I think
May I state my point of order?
What is the point of order?
Well, I said that, first of all, this is now in a form of a personal attack. I did not use the term rubber stamp, and she was responding to me by using that term and so forth. I did say it is the status quo because it's trying to use the same form that we used last year.
Can I as chair, and I probably can't, but can I not recognize what he's saying as being...
You can identify that his point of order has been heard, and then you would rule on it and say, thank you, Commissioner Pollard, and not take any further action. But if he does address a point of order, you have to acknowledge the point of order so that he can identify what it is. Now, once you've heard what you believe to be his concern, then you can rule immediately and say, thank you, and remind all the members to refrain from attacking a member's motives or addressing persons individually, acknowledge it, move on.
Okay, thank you.
But I would just caution that I don't think the members are addressing their comments towards others when they make a statement. I think we're being a little sensitive about, are they making that comment because I said something or in response to it? So I would just encourage the board to move on and try to keep your comments limited, very specific to the topic, and try to avoid, even if it looks like it was in reference to somebody else that spoke prior.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything else to say, Commissioner?
I'd just like to say that with respect to Robert's Rules of Order, there's a principle in Robert's Rules of Order that says the majority will decide, but the minority will be heard.
Absolutely. That's the whole tenet of it. Correct.
And therefore, let's make sure that the majority is not bullying the minority, Because each
I
one.
take point, that's a
May
point
I
of
finish
order.
my point?
I'm gonna the word bullying is not
Well, I
necessary.
mean, the chair can interrupt you and she can admonish you and tell you not to use certain words that are,
What words can I not
well, I
use?
think she's
Bullying.
concerned about bullying.
You said
Well,
the
I've
word
been
bullying.
bullied ever since I joined the
Commissioner
board.
Pollard, we're not here to make those kind of accusations. We're here to do
But at any
business, the
rate,
hospital district.
the majority rules what the minority will be heard. And there've been many times when I, in the minority, have not been heard, even though in 2 elections I represent 4,500 people. It's not just you, as you mentioned earlier, not you, Mr. Pollard. No, I'm representing 4,500 people that voted for me.
I think you can move on now.
Thank you.
That's what I was just gonna say. Can we just please move on to public comment?
First,
With respect,
excuse
Madam
me,
Chair.
we will not, I guess we're not gonna view, yes, if you would like to make a motion to that?
Well,
Well, you have public
That's
comment.
what she's asking for.
I'm saying,
That's what she would like.
yeah,
Yes.
let's move on to public comment and then,
Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion?
There has not been a vote on this issue.
We're not voting till after
No,
public
the
comment.
vote is-
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and hear the public comment, which will criticize, no doubt.
Okay, so do I got a second? All those in favor of moving on to public comment, say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I did not get that motion. Who made a motion and what are you moving?
Joan made a motion
To move to
to
public.
move on to public comment. I seconded it. Now there's a vote. On the issue- on the
We haven't
motion.
had a discussion on the motion.
I think
There is no motion pending to discuss. This was a discussion in general as to the topic on the agenda. In essence, I think you would view that motion from Ms. Young as a motion to close this discussion, move on to the next topic. That was her motion, that has been moved, that has been seconded, that has been approved. And so the action item is when you'll come back and have an actual motion
For the
that
action.
you'll vote and debate on.
And the motion will be a selection of the.
I don't know what the motion will be, Mr.
No, I
Pollard.
mean, it's scheduled, is it not?
Approval of the CEO, it's right
New
here.
business,
New
under new
business will be
business.
an action item.
The topic is
sorry.
to choose one of those three, but I don't know yet the motion. So now that that motion has passed, you should move on to public comment, then you'll come back to this action
Let's
item.
move on to public comment.
And was that vote to move on unanimous? Did you all vote?
To move on, yes, because there's no
Unanimous.
motion
Thank
on
you.
the table. So therefore,
Thank
move on unanimously.
Thank you for permission to do that, Commissioner.
I'm not giving, that's a snotty
Do
remark.
do we have
We
public
don't need that
comment?
kind of snotty remark. Sarcastic remark.
Okay. If I understand correctly, all of the commissioners got the review documents ahead of time to be able to review so that they could be informed during this meeting. And it's my understanding that you actually did that. There have been remarks by at least 2, if not 3 or 4 commissioners that they looked at these documents, that they didn't print them off. I don't print off large documents. I think it's kind of the preferred way of going about things, so I don't think that printing out a document is testament of due diligence or preparation. So I'm not exactly sure what purpose or need there would be to have a special work session when you've had plenty of opportunity to review it. I think people gain educated opinions about the review of documents. And so I would think you could go ahead and vote on it in good conscience. The other comment is, I've kind of been measuring how this board measured up regarding my first comment about getting embroiled in trivial, unnecessary parliamentarian talking back and forth. I think that it diminishes the effectiveness of this board. I think that if this board were to be evaluated by a third party, I'll leave it to each individual person in this room to identify what the score of the board would be. I would think that many of the members in this room on the board would get high marks and I think that there might be some members on board who would get failing marks or very poor marks. So I hope that my comments will be considered and that perhaps future meetings will be more productive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order,
Sir?
Madam Chair.
Is there any other public comment? And seeing as there's no other public, I'm assuming not. All right, so we've had our new business. Did you have a point of order, Commissioner Pollard?
I would just like to ask the recorder what the time was for the comment that we just heard.
He had a minute, just under a minute left.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, new business, we're going to approve the CEO evaluation forms. So who would like to make a motion on which form, and we can start a voting process?
Okay. I would like to make a motion to select sample 1. It's the incumbent format that we used last year. As like I said, I think it covers pretty much the qualitative, quantitative measures that I'm looking for there. And it's not so convoluted as like the others. Thank you.
Is there a second or another?
I would go second on that. I would like to specifically see the comparison between years.
Okay. All righty.
So,
All right. Is there any other further discussion about the form?
I agree with this. I actually like the Iowa form better, but that doesn't give us anything to compare.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah. Commissioner Pollard.
I just want to say that the one we used last year and the ones being proposed again this year is very superficial. And if you would see how other hospital districts make a selection like this, they go into work study for about 3 hours and really do a deep dive, not just superficial, whether it was the form was printed out or read on the computer. I'll be willing to bet you, if everyone were honest, they did not read these 50 pages. So.
Oh, I did. I just didn't realize that there was more.
All right, we're going to take a vote. All those in favor, and the one on the table right now, which is the 2018 CEO snow plowing, on the number 1, and let's see if it has a title to it, the form. It's just sample 1.
It just says.
All those in favor of sample 1, which is on the table, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose,
No.
say no. Okay, the ayes have it. We're going to go ahead and use sample 1 again this year. And next year we may do something different, but that will help us all have a comparison.
Okay.
Steve, how soon do we need to have these into you? Probably
The
ASP.
letter says they will be sample 1, and the attached material will be emailed to you tomorrow. If you would want a hard copy sent to you, contact me. Get that done.
Don't we already have?
We already have hard
We already
copies.
have.
Yeah, we have that. Yeah.
Well, we're going to send you the sample 1 with some attachments for your
okay,
reference.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Bylaws, the CEO job description, and then the final.
That would be helpful, thank you.
Yeah, so you'll have that when you're looking at this. That'll get to you tomorrow by email. But again, if you want hard copy, let me know. Or let Aaron know, actually. It's on the letter that you got. And then
Return of the clause.
return, we want to return to the HR department by June 22nd, a week from tomorrow.
that might not be, I'm going to be out of town. So
We'll do it tonight.
I got a few things to do.
What is the big rush? Why do we have to return it back?
I'll try to have it the following week.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's probably close enough.
after that.
And I wanna-
Friday, the last, that's the 29th.
Okay, I'll give 20, we'll change it to the 29th, if that's
Okay.
agreeable to everyone.
Okay. And I want everybody to know too, we went through HR. I do not pick this out and go after, we use a professional, we have HR staff, and we use them to help us decide what kind of forms to use. So, Commissioner Pollard.
I would just like to say that this was picked by the second level HR manager last year without any options given to the board for any other instrument.
Well, this year you had other instruments.
Well, yeah, but you know, it's difficult to change the status quo.
Is there New business items, we already did that.
Okay,
Other, is there
I'd
any
like-
other?
Yes. This is just a FYI, and I wanted to share with the board, with the commission. So I'm not gonna read through all this. We talk a lot about funding, resources, money. So I just wanted to share this, which I already have shared it with our CEO here. It's a philanthropic organization that's hopefully,
Okay.
that has a potential that for us to be able to tap on some of the resources that they have, the funding priorities that they have, and this is called the Pacific Hospital Preservation and Development Authority. They're the PDA. They are the hospital, that very imposing building that sits up on top of the Beacon Hill, the Capitol. That at one time they housed. It was a home for Amazon. Yeah, that was the
old
building.
Pacific Hospital, yes.
That was also the old Pacific Marine or Army and Medical
Yes,
Center.
yes,
Right.
Marine
So
Hospital.
now that's the
Marine Hospital first.
PHPDA. And let me just set up this. The reason I thought this would be a good source for us is that they champion effective healthcare for the vulnerable and disadvantaged in our community. I know Commissioner Pollard mentioned about some of those who cannot afford, that needs charity care. This particular funding, they do have two kinds of funding. One is the Nimble Grant funding that is up to $30,000. It's a short-term funding, but they also have the other one that's called Major Grant funding. But the Nimble Fund grant opportunity, you can apply to it anytime. And let me just read the funding priorities they have. Primarily, they focus on infrastructure improvements or small projects that help agencies carry out the mission of improving healthcare access and outcomes for underserved populations. The funds are awarded under this process that may be for the following purposes. They're short-term, they're infrastructure and capacity development. They can be used for planning, for technology improvement. And here's where I thought would be also very helpful for us. Training, including internal staff and training and external community trainings and educational events. I'm looking at, in order for us to better serve our District 4 constituents, we need to get them engaged in some of the activities that we could, and get that communication between us, between the hospital, District 4, and, not just Snoqualmie Ridge, because I know it's been a bone of contention that we don't reach out to our other districts like Snoqualmie, Carnation, Falls City, but we do, or North Bend or Preston. So, and it can be also used as a bridge to support staff salaries, or if we were to hire, during the project here, if there's a clear plan for ongoing future funding. They will address the funding principles, it's addressing the needs of the underserved populations, and there are some other organizations that I think that we can collaborate and partner with particular emphasis on decreasing health disparities, ensure access to existing and emerging healthcare resources for persons who might otherwise be overlooked or neglected by the healthcare system, adapt to changes in the healthcare delivery system and fill the gaps in care, and then document outcomes and ensure that evaluation mechanisms are in place.
Can I interrupt you for
Sure.
just a minute? Do we have a grant writer on board for the hospital?
We do not.
We do not.
I'd be happy to help out
Thank
on
you.
that, but I will need all the.
So,
Emma and I have been talking about this. We have some good ideas
Okay.
about how to
Yeah, how to approach it.
for grant
Grant.
writing?
Yeah.
Well, actually, what kind of
I
projects
did
would
a
be
grant
worthy
on one of
and looked upon favorably?
Yes.
By the,
Yeah.
okay. I know we've gotten some,
Discussion down at that end of the table,
Oh,
I
sorry.
cannot hear. These are not amplified.
yeah, I've noticed that.
Okay, close.
They haven't been at all today.
That is
Parker,
That's okay.
see,
Mr. Parker.
yeah. Our superintendent is just sharing with us, that I asked him if we had anybody that did grant writing. And he was sharing that he and Emma have been talking about ways that we can find money and what we can do to get that, and some ideas of where we would qualify for.
Yeah, so that we don't have to use our own
Can we
funds.
get a grant to get a grant writer?
No. Don't worry about that. We will take care of the grant writing.
Are there grant writers that take this on contingency? And that is if they are successful?
No.
No?
Organizations either have people that specialize in
Regardless of
grants.
whether you get the grant,
Yeah.
you still work for them.
And it doesn't matter who writes it. You don't have to be a grant writer.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
I
You
just want
have
to
to
compliment
answer
Mrs.
all the
Herron
correct.
for coming up with this and taking other initiatives outside the box.
I think that's an
These are
excellent.
fresh initiatives. And we
Yes,
need
this
to-
is the initiative,
We need to
engagement,
look at
community
fresh
engagement.
initiatives, not
Yes.
just do things in the old way.
Okay, it is
Okay.
9:20.
Thank
I
you.
believe we're at the end. We just did other.
No, we didn't do other.
Yes,
Well,
that was
I
my,
think Emma was on
my
it.
FYI.
I've got other.
Yes.
Okay,
Chair
I
recognizes
got
Pollard.
a communication from a member of the public that was highly critical of the way a friend of hers that she knew very closely was treated in an episode of a stroke. And the woman was in a grocery store or drugstore or something, and she was telling all the people what a bad experience she had at the hospital. Now, I think the board needs to hear that, but I did not ask her if I could share it. I'm only sharing it in a general way right now, but the details and so forth, I would have to get permission. And whether that person would allow me to do it with a name or anonymously, it's the kind of thing I think the board should hear, not just the flattery, but where there are problems or some alleged problems.
I would
And
strongly.
to that end, I would like to see if we couldn't add under communications something like communications that commissioners have heard or been given. Right now, we've got Dariel, Norris, Tom Parker are the only ones that are listed under communications. We communicate with the public too, and I think if a commissioner gets a letter or hears something from a member of the public, that would be a very good location for us to at least offer an opportunity for the commissioner to speak on that issue.
May I address that? I know that I've gotten notes before, and I've always forwarded them to our CEO and Dr. Whitcomb so that they can address them and go through the proper channels. I'm not sure that we are able to address those personally because we don't have access to all the information.
It's an issue of transparency. Wouldn't it be good for the commissioner who gets a complaint?
Well, you got to be careful too of privacy acts. And even-
Absolutely, and
so
that's why
I think
I'm
that,
not naming somebody.
yeah, that's why I go through the hospital district. I just hand it to them and say, this is what I've heard, what has been said, and let them deal with it. It's not our responsibility. We have HR and we have.
Can't go.
I'm gonna go. The chair recognizes that Commissioner Spikers has to leave.
Good
Good
night.
night.
The other thing under other, a couple of other items, and that is, right now, the move, if we're pursuing best practices, the move by many major corporations, and I saw a list of them, is to move away from the 1 year performance evaluation for the CEO, and instead do 4 months reviews so that there's closer feedback, because things can change so much from the time you set this quasi-contract to the time that the person is going to get a quality increase or whatever incentive increase. That's just, these corporations have determined that that's too long, and they're moving to 4-month feedback to the CEO on performance. I think that's something perhaps we ought to consider. Also, I think that the comment that was made about 2017 accomplishments, we should indeed hear those, but in the interest of transparency, we should also acknowledge any failures and shortcomings that we have. Finally, I have read advisories on this point, and they said instead of doing a list of accomplishments, you should do white papers on your most challenging problems. So at any rate, I offer that for the good of the order. Thank you.
Commissioner Pollard, in the future, I wish that you'd let us know timely so we can make sure that that gets into the docket and we can listen more attentively. We already had Commissioner Spiker's leave. It would just be helpful for the board because I think you had some important things to say, and I think we're all pretty tired. And
Well, I'm very tired also.
I'm sure you are.
But these things are not always programmable in advance. And I think that that's why you have an item called other. And therefore, you know, I think the amount of time I've taken for other is less than 5 minutes. And so I just figure it's worth it.
Is there a motion to
I made a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
I second.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
We have to-
discussion? Actually, I should have said any discussion first.
We have to sign, don't we?
Yes, we do. We are dismissed.
Thank you.